Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today we head deep into the loneliest stretches of West Texas highways where the road keeps going and something unnatural follows. These are not just stories, they are real accounts from travelers, truckers, and locals who came face to face with what hides in the silence. Lights hover over rivers with no reflection. Figures stand still where no one should be. Old roads loop forever and screams come from nowhere. This is 20 True Disturbing Road. Trips through West Texas, and every one of them leaves a mark. Most people make one big mistake. They watch, feel the chills, and then vanish without subscribing. Don't do that. Hit subscribe now, it's free, and it keeps the horror alive. Where are you watching from? What time is it there? Tell me in the comments, because once you are on these roads, getting out is not always up to you. They were halfway between Valentine and Marfa when they saw him. The sun was bleeding out behind the horizon, just enough light left to flatten everything in a dull orange wash. The desert on either side of Route 90 looked empty, endless, and heavy with silence. Leah rested her forehead against the passenger window, watching the landscape blur by in an endless pattern of mesquite, wire fences, and dry nothing. She'd fallen asleep for most of the drive and now felt groggy, her throat dry, her temples buzzing from too many miles, and not enough water. Mark was behind the wheel, chewing his lip, fingers twitching on the steering wheel in rhythm to the pita, barely audible hum of the radio. They'd been arguing earlier. Something dumb, her wanting to stop in Alpine for coffee, him insisting they push through to Marfa before it got too dark. The usual married couple bullshit, but it had made the drive feel longer. Tenser. Then they saw him. At first Leah thought it was a dead animal. Just a shape in the distance, something lumpy and irregular on the shoulder of the road. But as they got closer, the shape stood up and took the form of a man, barefoot, shirtless, stumbling. His jeans were soaked from the knees down with what looked like mud or blood. They couldn't tell, and his hair hung over his face in dark, sticky strands. He moved like a drunk or an injured animal, jerky and slow, like he couldn't quite figure out which part of his body to trust. Shit, Mark muttered, tapping the brakes. The car slowed. Leah sat up straighter, pulling her seatbelt tighter across her chest. Is he hurt? Looks like it. Pull over. Mark did. Not abruptly, not panicked, just a gradual veer to the shoulder like muscle memory told him it was the right thing to do. The man was maybe 20 feet ahead now, still staggering toward them, his face hidden behind his hair. The taillights cast a red glow onto the asphalt and the scrub brush around them. The world suddenly felt very quiet. Leah opened the door and got out. The dry evening air hit her skin like a slap. She started toward the man. Hey, she called, her voice too small for the open sky. You okay? You need help? The man didn't look up. He just kept walking forward. Not toward them exactly, just forward. Toward the car. Toward her. She stopped walking. Sir? Mark called out, now out of the car too. He moved up beside Leah, squinting into the dusk. The man finally stopped 10 feet away. Then he lifted his head. His eyes were wrong. Not blind, not glowing, not missing. Just wrong. Like he wasn't looking at them but through them. Like his face wasn't attached to anything behind it. Leah felt something cold ripple down her spine, a prickling in her legs like every hair on her body had stood up at once. He smiled. You're already too late, he said. His voice was flat and low, almost a whisper, but it hit them like a brick to the chest. Something about the way he said it, not accusatory, not afraid, just a simple truth spoken aloud. That was what made Leah take a step back. Not the blood, not the smile, just the certainty in his voice. Mark grabbed her arm. Get back in the car. She didn't argue. They climbed in, shut the doors, locked them. The man kept smiling. Mark hit the gas. They passed him slowly, not wanting to swerve, not wanting to look like they were panicking. As they moved past, Leah turned in her seat to keep him in view, but he was gone, not walking away, not fading into the dark, gone, like he'd never been there at all. Mark didn't say anything. He just drove. They reached Marfa about 30 minutes later, checked into a small Airbnb on the edge of town. An old adobe house with creaky floors and a rattling window unit that never quite won the war against the desert heat. Neither of them spoke much. Leah took a long shower. Mark cracked a beer. They ate leftover tacos out of the fridge and pretended it was just another weird roadside moment. Texas was full of them. That night Leah didn't sleep well. She dreamed about a road that went on forever, flat and gray and lined with empty cars. She walked barefoot through them, each car door open, engine still running. Every time she looked inside one, she saw herself sleeping, smiling, bleeding. She woke up gasping for air around 4 a.m., heart pounding. Mouth dry. Mark was already awake. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. "You were sleep-talking," he said quietly. Said something about him being inside. She didn't remember saying anything. The next morning they checked the dash cam, just to confirm they weren't crazy. Mark had mounted a new one a few weeks earlier, one of those wide-lens, high-def, always recording things. It should have caught the man. Should have caught them slowing down, pulling over, getting out. But when they watched the footage, there was nothing. They never slowed down. The road ahead stayed clear, the desert unchanged, the sky darkening as they rolled through the silence. They never stopped. Never saw a man. Never pulled over. And yet they both remembered it. Clear as day. The man's walk. His eyes. That voice. Leah played the footage 3 times before she noticed something else. A moment when the screen pixelated, not a normal glitch, something more deliberate. A flicker. Just before they supposedly passed the spot where the man had been standing, the screen warped. Just for a frame or two, she paused it, rewound, paused again. There was a shape in the passenger seat. Just for a second. Just a blur of something. Long black hair, a bare shoulder, and something that might have been a smile. Is that? Mark started, but didn't finish. They looked at each other. Neither wanted to say it. They turned the dash cam off. For the rest of the trip, Leah kept looking in the mirrors. Every dark shape on the shoulder made her tense. At one point they passed a hitchhiker with a bag slung over his shoulder, thumb. In the air, Mark didn't slow down. Leah didn't ask him to. When they finally got back to Corpus, they tried to move on. Told themselves it had been a hallucination. Heat stroke, stress. Maybe even some kind of weird gas leak in the car that made them both trip. But some nights Leah would still wake up, heart pounding, convinced someone was standing in the hallway. Once, while brushing her teeth, she looked up and saw a shape behind her in the mirror. Not Mark, not a shadow. A man with wet hair and blank eyes. She blinked and it was gone. 2 months later, their car wouldn't start. The mechanic found something odd when he opened the hood. A dead bird wrapped in a length of wire, coiled around the battery like it had nested there. No one could explain it. Mark eventually got rid of the car, but the dreams didn't stop. In all of them, it's the same road, the same man, and every time he turns and looks at her, he says the same thing. You're already too late. FM 1111 isn't a road you take unless you mean to be alone. It's 52 miles of West Texas nothing. A 2-lane stretch of blacktop that crawls between Sierra Blanca and Van Horn like a scar across the desert's face. No gas stations. No diners, no homes. Just yucca, rock, and wind. Locals call it the Devil's Spine, though if you ask them why, They won't give you much more than a shrug or a joke about flat tires and dead engines. You'll never see more than 1 or 2 cars on it during the day and at night. Well, no one really drives FM 1111 after dark. Not anymore. The glowing mile starts 12 miles north of Sierra Blanca, where the desert turns jagged and the mesas lean in closer like they're listening. It's not marked. There's no sign, no change in the pavement, just a stretch of asphalt that after midnight starts to glow faintly green like swamp gas or old watch dials. People say it only happens on nights with no moon, and it only lasts about 15 minutes, but that's all rumor. No one's caught it on camera. No one's sure what it really is. Then came the biker. Guy named Nate Rios, 41, mechanic, rode a beat-up Indian Scout and ran a YouTube channel called Gear Ghost. His thing was ghost towns and abandoned highways, urban legends, mostly harmless stuff. He'd been all over the Southwest chasing stories, most of which turned out to be weather balloons and bad wiring. But he took FM 1111 serious. Posted a teaser video in early May, said he'd gotten a tip about the glowing mile from a state trooper who saw it once in 2004 and never spoke about it again. Nate said he was going out there with 3 GoPros, a body cam, and a drone. Gonna catch it, he said, and if it's just headlights off some medhead's truck, fine. But if it's something else, his last known footage was uploaded on May 18th, timestamp 12:02 a.m. It's only 12 minutes long. The first 4 minutes show him riding northbound on FM 1111, his headlights slicing the dark, his helmet cam catching flashes of bleached scrub and looming rocks. He's talking into his mic, cracking jokes, saying how creepy the place is, how it smells like a burned-out church and hot pennies. At 12:06, the feed starts glitching. Not like frame skips, more like light interference, that kind of subtle warping you get when a magnet's too close to the lens. Then, at 12:07, all the cameras shut off except the one on his phone, which was mounted on the handlebars. That one keeps running. It doesn't catch much, just static, heavy and hissing, with faint distortions like someone breathing over a speaker. It goes on for over an hour. People picked it apart frame by frame and found nothing. No shapes, no flashes, no lights in the distance. Just static, and once, around the 28-minute mark, the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. Slow and deliberate, like someone walking up to the phone. Then nothing. The phone was found by a rancher 2 days later, lying face up on the shoulder of the road. No sign of Nate. His bike wasn't there. No tire marks, no blood. Just the phone and a scuffed boot print leading into the desert. Investigators followed it for about half a mile before it just stopped. The boot print, just one dead, ended in flat, undisturbed sand. No wind that night. No animals in the area. Dogs wouldn't go near it. They never found him. Word got around. Of course, truckers stopped taking FM 1111 altogether. The highway patrol diverted traffic during graveyard shifts. Paranormal groups started showing up, setting up rigs and night vision scopes. None of them stayed more than a night. A few said they heard things scratching under the tires, something tapping on the windows, but no one got footage. The roads, not famous, just whispered about. I didn't believe any of it until I drove it myself last October. I'd just come off a long shift in El Paso and needed to get back to my brother's place in Van Horn. I was tired, pissed off, and thought I could shave 40 minutes off my trip. My GPS kept rerouting me away from FM 1111, but I turned onto it anyway, figuring the satellites were just being cautious. I passed Sierra Blanca at 11:45. Radio died around mile 10. I remember because I'd been listening to a college station out of Marfa playing old blues, and suddenly it cut to dead air. I didn't think much of it, but the temperature dropped like 30 degrees in 5 minutes. I turned off the AC, but it didn't help. My windshield started fogging up from the outside. That was the first thing that felt wrong. At exactly midnight. My headlights dimmed, not burned out, just dimmed, like someone had turned the brightness down. The road ahead was still visible, but there was a faint green sheen running along the pavement, like the reflection from a fluorescent bulb submerged in water. It was coming from the asphalt itself, glowing just enough to paint the undersides of the brush with sickly light. I slowed down to a crawl. The glow didn't pulse or move. It just was. It looked like the road was alive, like it had been feeding on something. I rolled down the window, and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Total. No wind, no insects, no engine noise. My car was still moving, but I couldn't hear it. It was like the air had turned to cotton. I pulled over. I don't know why. I guess part of me wanted to believe it was all explainable. My phone had no signal, but I tapped the voice recorder. Just in case, I got out. The glow was stronger outside the car, enough to see by. I walked 10 paces onto the road, holding the phone out, trying to pick up anything. I stood there for maybe 3 minutes. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Behind me, near the car. Slow, heavy. Not boots, bare feet. I turned around and there was nothing, but the sound didn't stop. It got closer. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. I backed away, heart pounding. The light on the road was brighter now, and I could see that it wasn't just coming from the pavement, it was rising from beneath it, like the blacktop was a membrane stretched over something lit from within. Something moving. The surface of the road began to blister. Not heat blisters, more like something underneath it was pressing upward. Shapes. Long, thin shapes. Hands. Dozens of them, maybe more. Pressing against the pavement, warping it upward. Without breaking through. They moved in waves, like a ripple under ice. I ran. I got in the car and floored it. The engine screamed. My headlights were useless now. The green glow lit the whole mile like a sick aurora. I didn't look in the rearview. I didn't check the recorder. I just drove until the glow was gone and the radio came back on. It was playing old blues again, like nothing had happened. I didn't stop driving until I reached my brother's house. I didn't speak for 2 days. The recorder file was blank. 50 minutes of silence. No wind. No steps. Not even the sound of my voice, like the air had swallowed everything. The only thing on the tape was a single phrase, buried 37 minutes in, almost inaudible, but there if you crank the volume high enough. It says, "He sees you now." That road's still there, still unmarked, still empty. And that mile still glows. Most folks just speed through West Texas on I-10 without thinking too hard about what's out there. It's long, hot, dry, and unforgiving. But around mile marker 202, not far from the Balmorhea exit, there's a low spot in the land where the fog sometimes gathers unnaturally thick, even in the middle of the damn desert. It clings to the ground like it has a mind of its own. Locals don't talk much about that stretch, and if they do, it's with that uneasy chuckle people use when they're trying not to believe something they know might be true. Travis Boone was hauling water pipe through the Permian Basin when he first saw her. He'd taken the route 100 times, mostly at night because the roads were clear and the oil rigs didn't wait for sunrise. He was pushing east, just past Balmorhea, when the fog rolled in like a wall. At first, he thought it was dust or maybe smoke from one of those brush fires that sometimes sweep across the flats, but it didn't smell like smoke. It was clean, cold, wrong. He slowed down, flicked on his high beams. They didn't do much. The fog just swallowed the light. Then, out of nowhere, he saw the bridge. It was narrow, barely wide enough for one vehicle, and made of weathered wood that looked like it belonged in some forgotten part of Appalachia, not the middle of the West Texas desert. He blinked, looked again. Still there, and standing in the middle of it was a girl. She couldn't have been more than 16, wearing a white sundress that clung to her like it was soaked through. Her bare feet were black with dirt or oil or something darker. Long black hair hung in front of her face, dripping with water that had no business being there. No rain, no lakes. Not for miles. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just stood there. Like she was waiting for something. Travis swerved hard to avoid her, heart pounding, eyes wide. The truck skidded sideways, almost jackknifed, but he managed to hold it. When he looked back through the mirror, there was nothing. No bridge. Number. Girl. Just that damn fog already thinning out behind him. He didn't stop until he hit Fort Stockton. When he climbed down from the cab, he found something clinging to the windshield wiper. At first, he thought it was a dead bird or a plastic bag. But when he pulled it free, it was a long clump of black hair. Wet, still dripping. He threw it down and didn't tell anyone. The story spread in whispers. No one wanted to admit they'd seen her. Hell, you start talking like that around roughnecks and they'll laugh you right out of the lot. But there was always that look in their eyes when they passed the stretch again. Tense, watching. Some of them started putting rosaries on their rearview mirrors. Others refused to drive through after dark. But the smart ones, those with long memories, they remembered what happened to Bobby Keene. Bobby was a tow truck driver based out of Pecos. Used to run emergency calls up and down I-10. One night, he got a call about a stalled-out sedan near. The Balmore he cut off. Said it was foggy as hell, which didn't make sense for August, but he headed out anyway. He called in when he found the car empty, still running, doors open. No sign of the driver. He radioed dispatch, said he was going to tow it in. Then nothing. They found the tow truck 2 days later, engine still idling, hazards blinking in the sun. No Bobby, just a set of wet footprints, small ones, leading up to the driver's side door and then ... nothing. No prints leading away. The tow cable had been unhooked, neatly coiled. They said the inside of the cab smelled like river water. That part didn't make sense. There's no river for miles. After that, people started calling it the ghost on the bridge. Said it only showed up in the fog. Said if you saw her and didn't stop, something followed you. Not right away, maybe not even for weeks. But she came eventually. Like with the McAllen family. They were headed west from Fort Worth to visit a cousin in El Paso. Mom, Dad, and their 2 kids. Somewhere around that cursed stretch of highway, the fog rolled in. The mom swore later that she saw a girl standing in the road, just a flash in the headlights, and screamed for her husband to stop. He didn't see anything, thought she was imagining things. They kept driving. An hour later, their daughter started crying in the backseat. Said there was someone under the blanket with her. When they pulled over to check, the blanket was wet, entangled with long strands of black hair. They turned around, drove straight back to Fort Worth. The girl didn't speak for 2 weeks. When she finally did, she told her parents that a wet lady whispered to her every night, telling her about the place under the water. They moved out of state not long after. No one's ever been able to explain the bridge. There's no record of any structure ever being built there. No creeks, no rivers, no reason for a bridge to exist in the first place. But the sightings keep happening, always in the fog, always just for a second. Some folks say it's a mirage, some atmospheric trick, or a shared hallucination. But too many people have the same story. A girl, a white dress, black hair, wet. Some say she was a runaway, maybe from one of those old orphanages that used to be scattered across West Texas. Others claimed she drowned in a well or was thrown from a passing car during a storm and left to die in a washout. But there's never been a name, never been a body. I drove through there myself once. Didn't mean to, just took a wrong exit on the solo trip back from Tucson. It was late, maybe past 2. My GPS glitched out and I couldn't find the damn signal. Then the fog came, thick as cotton. I slowed down, leaned forward, and that's when I saw it. The bridge dot, it was just there, out of nowhere. The road bent, in a way it shouldn't have, leading onto the wooden planks. And there she was, standing dead center. Her head tilted like a bird listening to a sound you couldn't hear. I locked up the brakes. My car stalled. Everything went still, silent. Even the desert bugs, even the wind. And I swear to God, she smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a sad one. Either. Just ... empty. She raised one hand, and water started dripping from her fingers like she'd just come up from some black lake. I blinked, and she was gone. I got the engine started and didn't stop driving until I hit a Motel 6 outside Sonora. When I got out of the car, my shoes slipped on something. I looked down and saw the pavement wet under the front bumper. Not oil, not coolant, just ... water. Cold, clear, and tangled in the grill. Wrapped tight around the headlight was a knot of black hair. I don't take I-10 near Balmorhea anymore. Don't even like saying the name. Something out there doesn't sleep, doesn't forget. It waits for the fog. It waits for the ones who don't believe. And if you see the bridge, don't stop. Don't look. Just keep driving. Because she's still out there, and she's waiting for you. On a chill Sunday evening in late October, just as the mesquite trees along the shoulder began to lose their leaves and the air picked up that dry, restless feel of approaching winter, 2 men drove west along Ranch Road 152 outside Llano, Texas. The sun had gone down an hour ago. They'd finished their weekend hunt, a trip they'd been taking for the past 7 years, always to the same lease, always the same routine. Will Daniels drove. His best friend since childhood, Mike Tiller, slouched in the passenger seat, thumbing aimlessly through a playlist that kept skipping due to spotty reception. They were a few miles past Castel, with nothing but low hills, and cedars around them, and not another car for miles. Will's Dodge was caked with red dust from the ranch roads and still carried the faint smell of gun oil and venison in the bed. The heater rattled, the engine hummed steady, and both men were sunk into the kind of tired silence that came after a long day, and the cold. Mike was the first to notice it. He straightened in his seat and sniffed once, then again, wrinkling his nose. "You smell that?" Will sniffed. "Burnt rubber?" "No," Mike said. "Like ... sulfur, rotten eggs, chemical." Will lowered the driver's side window a crack. Cold air rolled in, biting and sharp, but the smell intensified. It was thick and unnatural, a foul blend of decay and something industrial, something bitter. "Could be a gas leak somewhere," Will said. "Out here?" Mike asked. "What, from the armadillos?" Will didn't answer. The headlights swept around a bend in the road, revealing nothing but more empty brush and a distant line of fence posts. The nearest house was miles off. They were in that in-between stretch of Texas, too far from any real town, too far from help if something went wrong. The engine coughed once. Then again Will looked down at the dash. The RPM meter dipped, then fluttered back up. What the hell? The smell was worse now, so strong it was making their eyes water. Mike covered his nose with the sleeve of his hoodie. "You gotta pull." "Over, man." Will tried to answer, but the truck died in the middle of the road. Just a low, sad whine from under the hood, and then silence. The dashboard lights blinked out. Headlights died. They were swallowed in darkness so complete it felt unnatural. No moon. No stars, just pitch black. Jesus, Mike said under his breath. Will turn the key. Nothing. Not even the starter clicking. The battery was stone dead. They sat for a moment, the stink creeping in through the vents. Will opened the door, letting it swing wide. Don't, Mike said. Just ... let single quote second. But Will had already stepped out. The silence was deeper than it should have been. No wind, no insects. Even the usual night calls of owls and coyotes had vanished. Mike got out too, slamming the door behind him like noise alone could push back whatever was wrong. He pulled out his phone, thumbed the screen. No signal. Not even one bar. Flashlight? Will clicked his, shining it under the hood. Nothing looked burned. No leaking fluids. No smell of oil or gas, just that weird sulfur stink. I don't get it, Will said. It just died. Then they heard it. A soft rhythmic thump. Not loud, but definite. Coming from the road behind them. They turned, flashlights casting long, nervous beams over the pavement. The fog was rolling and then low, and fast, like it was being poured out of a spout just over the horizon. It moved unnaturally smooth, not drifting or swirling, just sliding toward them like a wall. And through it came something moving. Will raised the beam higher. It was a deer. At first. A big buck. Tall. 8-point rack. It walked with that deliberate, stiff-legged gait deer have, neck stiff, head level. But as it drew closer, it didn't shy from the lights or startle from their voices. It came right up the center line of the road, calm as a person on a sidewalk. When it was 20 feet away, it stopped and stared at them. Mike took a step back. Will, I see it. The deer didn't move. Its body was perfect, no wounds, no blood, healthy. But its eyes, they were wrong. Too forward-facing, too round. Too human. Not just human-like. Human. Real, unmistakable human eyes staring out of a deer's face. Wide and brown and full of something between awareness and calculation. Will felt his legs lock. His chest was tight. Mike, we need to go. We need to walk. Now? But Mike wasn't moving. His flashlight trembled slightly in his grip. What the hell is that? The fog wrapped around the buck's legs, and then the thing smiled. Not with its mouth, it didn't have lips, but its eyes crinkled at the corners, just slightly. Enough to let them know that whatever was inside, that thing understood what smiling was. Will turned. We're walking. We're walking now. He grabbed Mike's sleeve and they headed down the road in the opposite direction. They didn't look back. The smell got stronger, the chemical tang coating their tongues like battery acid. They walked a mile, maybe 2. No sound. No lights. Not even the buzz of distant power lines. Then behind them, footsteps. Soft. 4-leg. Will turned around and shone the flashlight. Empty road. He kept walking. More fog rolled and denser now, swallowing the fields on either side. The beam of the flashlight only cut a few feet ahead before vanishing into the white. Mike whispered, Will, I saw something in the fog. What? Like a shadow. It was crawling. Will didn't answer. Then the whispering started, not voices. Exactly more like breath patterns. But with rhythm, shape, intent. They sounded like names or maybe prayers. No source. All around them, the fog thickened. Shapes moved in the mist. Brief flickers. Human figures walking on all fours. Antlers above their heads. One stopped just outside the beam of light. It stood on 2 legs. Tall, thin, head tilted. The antlers twisted like branches. Its skin looked stretched. Dry. They broke into a run. Didn't speak again until the lights of a gas station cut through the white. They stumbled in, both panting, covered in sweat despite the cold. The cashier, a man in his 70s with tired eyes, barely looked up from his stool. Truck trouble? Will nodded. You come off Ranch Road 152? Another nod. The old man stared at them for a long beat. Then he stood, reached under the counter, and placed 2 cups of black coffee in front of them. No charge. He didn't ask what they saw. They didn't tell him. Later, after a tow and a motel stay, they retrieved the truck. It started fine. No battery issues. No sulfur smell. They never took that road again. Never hunted together again either. And they never not once spoke about what they saw when the fog rolled in. He saw the sign for the exit around 10:37 p.m., bright white letters glowing in the dark, like a freshly bleached bone. Exit 54, Mason Ridge. It was strange because he'd driven Highway 67 between Claiborne and San Angelo a dozen times, and never once seen that exit. But he was tired, late for a client meeting in Midland the next morning, and low on gas. The tank needle was kissing the red, and the GPS had gone glitchy ever since he passed through Glen Rose. The screen just showed his little blue dot spinning in place, and the voice had gone mute. The exit ramp peeled off the highway sharp and narrow, 2 lanes that twisted through a gap in a rocky hillside. It looked recently paved, but with no reflector posts and no signage except that eerie glowing one. His name was Jared Collins, 38, divorced, and a regional manager for a chain of construction supply companies that mostly built warehouses and ugly strip malls. His job was schedules and margins, and he liked that the world made sense, that it followed rules. But there was something off about that exit, not just unfamiliar, but wrong. Like it had been dropped in the middle of nowhere by someone who didn't understand how roads worked. The road narrowed again, 2 lanes became one, and trees crept closer to the edges. Then the trees gave way to a wide-open plain, dark except for a few scattered streetlights and the moon's dull glow. That's when he saw it, a town. A perfect little town, lit like a stage set. The buildings were old-fashioned, 1950s American, a white picket. Fences, neon diner signs, hand-painted windows reading things like shoe repair and dry goods. The gas station had a spinning golf sign and a rust-red Coke machine out front. Everything was impossibly clean, impossibly still. There were no cars parked along the curb, no trash in the gutters. The storefront windows looked like they had never been touched. He pulled up to the pump, cut the engine, and stepped out. The air smelled like burnt sugar and dust. Somewhere nearby, a radio was playing a slow Patsy Cline tune. He heard the creak of a screen door before a man in overalls, and a white cap stepped out from behind the pumps. He was old, maybe 70, but strong, with bright, cloudy eyes and a grin that looked a little too wide for his face. "Evenin'," the man said. "You're just in time. We close up round 11. Jared hesitated, then offered a tight smile. "Appreciate it. You take cards?" "Sure do," the man said, patting the pump. "These babies are more modern than they look." Jared swiped his card. No error. The screen lit up with a flicker. He watched the numbers spin as he filled the tank. The old man leaned against a metal post, watching him. "Not from around here, are ya?" "Nope, passing through. Didn't even know this exit existed." "Well, Mason Ridge ain't much to look at, but it's home. Folks are real friendly here." A low whistle drifted down the street, followed by a man pushing a broom in front of the diner. A group of teenagers sat on a bench in front of the general store, sipping soda from glass bottles and laughing. A woman in a floral dress pushed a baby carriage past a clock shop that seemed stuck at 9:20. "Where's the closest motel?" Jared asked, eyeing the empty road ahead. "I could use a bed and a shower." The gas station man pointed down the block. "You'll find the Whispering Pines Inn just past the town square. Tell Miss Addie that Hank sent ya." Jared nodded, capped the tank, and got back in the car. The kids on the bench all turned to watch him drive past. Their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. He passed the courthouse, a bandstand in the Faust, center of a manicured lawn and a barber shop with a red and white pole spinning lazily. It felt like being inside a postcard. Too still. Too preserved. The inn was a 2-story Victorian house with a porch light that flickered slightly, like it was straining to stay alive. Inside, the air was warm, thick with lavender and something beneath it coppery and faint. The front desk bell gave a metallic ping when he rang it. A woman emerged from a back room. She looked like she belonged in a Sears catalog from the Eisenhower era. Bouffant hair, pale pink lipstick, a lace collar. Her voice was syrupy and slow. "You must be Mr. Collins. Hank radioed ahead. Your room's all ready upstairs." "Number 3. He blinked. "You know my name?" "Well, of course, dear. Everyone who stops in here's meant to. We've been waiting on you." The room was clean, impossibly clean. The sheets smelled like bleach and lilac. No Wi-Fi, no TV. The window looked out over the town square, and he could still see the teens sitting out front of the store. None of them had moved. Their heads turned in sync, staring up at his window. He stepped back instinctively and closed the curtain. Sleep came slow. There was a hum in the walls, not electrical, more like whispering. Indistinct words, barely under the threshold of hearing. He woke several times in the night with a distinct sense that someone had just left the room. The bed would be cold beside him, the floor creaking gently. The doorknob still swaying slightly on its hinge. At dawn, he packed quickly and headed out. Miss Addie was already at the desk, smiling that same unmoving smile. The town was still. Quiet. Too quiet. The streets were empty. The kids were gone. The bandstand looked burned. Charred boards and soot stains blackened its base, even though it had looked new the night before. He drove through town without stopping. As he passed the gas station, he noticed that the spinning golf sign had stopped moving. The building looked shuttered, its windows boarded. The Coke machine was smashed and rusted. A piece of torn fabric, maybe part of Hank's cap, hung from the pump handle like a flag. He floored the accelerator and tore down the road. The trees closed in again. The pavement grew rougher, cracked and pitted. Weeds punched through the blacktop like something alive. His GPS was still spinning. When he reached the highway, he glanced in the rearview mirror. There was no exit behind him. Just thick trees and a chain-link fence half buried in kudzu. No sign, no off-ramp, no town. He pulled over and got out, walking up and down the shoulder in disbelief. He even flagged down a passing 18-wheeler. The driver leaned out, cigarette dangling from his lip. "You okay, buddy? Where's the Mason Ridge exit?" Jared asked. "Exit 54? The driver frowned. "Ain't no exit 54 on this stretch. Next one's 56, near Sweetwater. You drunk?" Jared didn't answer. He got back in his car and drove. That night in Midland, he booked a room at the Marriott and tried to shake it off. A dream, he told himself, a vivid hallucination. Maybe a micronap behind the wheel. He pulled out the receipt from the gas station, but it was just a blank slip. No numbers, no logo. The tank had been full, though. He didn't stop for gas again. Until Amarillo, he tried to find the town on Google Maps. Nothing. No record of Mason Ridge. No Whispering Pines Inn. Not even a Hank's Golf Station. He asked a few locals. Nobody had heard of it. It wasn't listed in county records. It didn't exist. But sometimes, when he drives Highway 67 alone, usually after dark, he swears he sees the sign again, just ahead in the distance. Exit 54. Mason Ridge. It never stays in one place. Sometimes it's before Glen Rose. Other times it's just past Bollinger. The highway shifts around it as if trying to deny it's there. But it is Dot, and once, just once, he gave in to the temptation. He turned off at the sign again, determined to prove it was real. He drove the road. He passed the trees. But there was no town this time. Just a field of burned-out cars. Every one of them facing west. Every one of them empty. Their engines cold. Their driver's seats covered in ash. He never talks about that trip. He stopped driving that stretch altogether. Even quit his job. Moved. East to Louisiana. But still, every so often, he'll wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of whispering through the walls. Or catch the scent of burnt sugar and dust on the breeze. And when he checks the mirror, just for a moment, he'll swear he sees a gas pump behind him, or the glint of a neon diner sign, or a woman in a floral dress pushing an empty baby carriage across a street that no longer exists. The first time Jonathan heard the loop, he was driving east on Loop 338 just past midnight. The radio in his battered Chevy Malibu flickered between static and a faint hum, the kind that slips in when you're between stations. He was heading home. After a long shift at the Walmart on 42nd Street, exhausted and half dozing, when the voice came through clipped at first, but unmistakably human. "Please," it said, a man's voice cracking, panicked. "Don't do this. I got a wife, man. I got kids." Jonathan's hands tightened on the wheel. The air in the car turned brittle. There was silence, then a second voice, colder, calculated. You should have thought of that before. What followed sounded like a scuffle, a guttural cry, and then silence, followed by static. Jonathan stared at the radio, every hair on his body standing up. Then, just as the hum started to return, the same words played again. Exactly the same. He pulled over onto the shoulder, cut the engine, and sat there listening. Over and over, the same desperate plea and the same response, with the same background noise, the crunch of gravel, wind cutting through brush, a faint buzz like power lines overhead. It repeated 3 times before he switched off the radio and drove home with his heart hammering in his chest. He didn't tell anyone the next day. Didn't say a word to his coworkers or his roommate. But 2 nights later, curiosity got the better of him, and he took the long route home again, driving the loop with the radio dialed to the same frequency, 89.1 FM. Again, the voices. Again, the plea. Again, the cold reply. Word of the phenomenon spread in whispers. CB radio guys started calling it the Odessa Loop. Truckers passing through mentioned it online, and soon it became a niche internet mystery. Paranormal Reddit boards lit up with speculation ghosts, government experiments, time loops. But nobody had a solid answer. The station wasn't listed in FCC databases. It wasn't transmitting from any known tower. A sophomore at Permian Basin named Miles Garza decided to find out for himself. Miles was one of those rare kids who could write code like breathing, build his own gear from spare parts, and crack encrypted networks with a grin. He built a directional antenna and a custom scanner, planning to triangulate the signal's origin by driving the loop at night and recording everything. They found him 3 days later in his parked car beneath an overpass near FM 3503. The car was running, the headlights on. Miles was slumped over the passenger seat, eyes open but unfocused, blood trickling from both ears. His laptop was a melted slab of plastic. EMTs said he was still breathing, but unresponsive. He's still in a coma. No brain activity. Doctors can't explain it. That was 6 months ago. The city quietly removed the car within hours. The police report listed it as vehicular medical incident, and most of the media buried the story. But the online forums kept going, more rabid than ever. Conspiracy theorists, amateur radio operators, ghost hunters, all of them trying to crack the mystery. Some started claiming there were new voices now, different conversations. Like the loop had expanded. One voice, a woman's crying, then whispering something unintelligible. Another one, breathless, saying, "It's watching us." I didn't believe any of it, not really. I mean, I'm not a skeptic, but I'm not the tinfoil hat type either. But last week, my brother Nate vanished. He'd just gotten back from working rigs near Monaghan's, and he was driving home to Midland on Loop 338. He sent me a voice memo on WhatsApp around 12:13 a.m. He sounded tired, but calm. Then another message came through 2 minutes later. It was just static. After that, nothing. His truck was found on the shoulder between West University and Yukon Road. Driver's door open, keys still in the ignition, headlights on. No signs of a struggle, but his phone was gone. The inside of the cab smelled like something burnt. Not smoke, but ozone sharp, electric. No trace of him. Not a single clue. I've driven that stretch every night since. I've listened to the loop. I've recorded it. I've matched it to the exact same voices, the same sequence. But now there's something different. The plea is slower. More strained. Double quotes, please. Please. I got a wife, man. The reply comes quicker, harsher. You should have thought of that before. But in the background now, barely audible, you can hear something else. Breathing. Not human. Heavy, rhythmic, like it's just behind the microphone. Last night, I heard something new. A third voice. It wasn't part of the loop. It cut in, distorted and raw. It said my name. Twice. First a whisper, then louder, broken with static. Joel. I slammed the brakes, swerved into the dirt, and killed the engine. The voice kept repeating my name, not part of the loop. Something else, layered over it, like it was trying to break through. I turned off the radio. The voice kept going. I ripped the battery from the recorder, and still it didn't stop. The voice filled the car, coming from nowhere. I don't remember driving home. I woke up in bed with dirt under my nails and my mouth dry as sand. The loop hasn't played since. The frequency is dead. But this morning, my phone rang at 3:17 a.m. I didn't answer it. The number was from Odessa. No voicemail. But in my voicemail folder, there's a recording that wasn't there before. 32 seconds long. It's the same loop. The man begging. The cold reply. Then my voice whispering, "It's watching us." I'm not sleeping tonight. Probably not ever again. But I'll drive the loop again soon. I have to know what happened to Nate. I have to find out where the signal is coming from. Maybe the loop is a warning. Maybe it's bait. Maybe it's both. If you hear it, turn around. But if you don't, then it's already too late. It started on a dry Wednesday morning in late July, the kind of heat that crawled under your skin and sat there. Koyanosa wasn't much of a town, just a cluster of double wides, a diner that served eggs until 2, and a liquor store that stayed open later than it should have. The oil field on the outskirts of town was leased out by a mid-size independent called Navarro Drilling. They kept things quiet, off the books when they could, cheap where it mattered. But the pay was steady, and out in West Texas, that counted for something. The two men working the pad that morning were Jesse Marin and Raymond Hightower. Jesse was a wiry ex-welder from Fort Stockton, 37 but looking 50, with a mangled hand from a blowout 5 years back. Raymond was younger, about 26, fresh off a divorce and sleeping in the bunkhouse out near County Road 1312. Nobody knew much about him, except he was fast with a socket wrench and didn't ask dumb questions. The job was a straightforward vertical well, supposed to hit crude around 11,000 feet. The seismic surveys had been clean. No weird geologies, No salt domes or gas pockets flagged. Jesse had done a dozen just like it, and Raymond had 3 under his belt. The derrick was humming by noon, drill bit chewing its way through ancient limestone like clockwork. At about 9,200 feet, the bit started dragging. Not hard, just a subtle shift, like chewing through muscle instead of bone. The mud returned slower, clotted, the color darker than usual, almost black, but not quite. Jesse watched it run through the shakers with a slow, syrupy pulse. It had a sheen like wet vinyl and a stink like scorched rubber. Not crude. Not even close. Could be tar sands, Raymond said, though he didn't sound convinced. Jesse didn't answer. He leaned in close, watching the slop catch the light, listening to the odd rhythm of the pump. Every few seconds, the fluid seemed to pulse, not in sync with the machinery, but slightly offbeat, like a second heartbeat buried under the noise. He ran a gloved hand through the edge of the catch tray, pulled it back. The stuff didn't stick like oil. It recoiled. Like it didn't want to be touched. They shut down the rig at sunset, filed a report with the field supervisor, just said they'd hit an unexpected substance, needed analysis. Nobody responded. By morning, Jesse had stopped talking. He showed up on site, stared at the mud return for 10 hours straight, didn't say a word. Raymond took over most of the tasks, nervous, twitchy. He tried to call the main office in Odessa. No answer. The next day, he smashed his cell phone with a crescent wrench. They finished the hole in silence. Didn't log the depth right, didn't seal the well properly. Nobody from Navarro came out to inspect, and after the final mud return was collected black, thick and pulsing like before, they capped the well and left. Or tried to. Jesse stayed in his trailer, blinds shut, AC off in the dead of summer. He didn't sleep. Neighbors said the light stayed on all night, flickering sometimes. 3 weeks later, he was arrested for breaking into the Koyanosa Public Library. He wasn't trying to steal anything. Just sitting there in the dark, surrounded by printer paper filled with black circles, hundreds of them, all hand-drawn with heavy ink, some so thick the paper was tearing. Perfect circles, some big enough to cover a desk. No variation, no notes. Just the same shape over and over again. When the sheriff asked him why, Jesse only whispered, "They're watching." He was transferred to Big Spring State Hospital by the end of August, diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic. They found more drawings in his trailer, some tape to the walls, some lining the shower stall. One, folded and stuffed inside the freezer, showed a large black ring swallowing a smaller white circle. The edges were ragged, almost bleeding. Raymond disappeared the same week Jesse was committed. He walked out of the bunkhouse one evening and never came back. His truck was found parked at the edge of a sinkhole on the western edge of the oil field. The hole hadn't been there 2 days earlier, just appeared overnight. A neat black pit about 20 feet across, lined with slick, rubbery stone. The tires on Raymond's truck were melted, not burst melted, like they'd been held. Over a slow fire, a crew from Navarro came out finally, mostly to secure the site. They posted warning signs, unstable ground, do not approach. But no formal investigation followed, no safety audits, no mention in the local paper. The Koyanosa Police Department filed Raymond's case as a voluntary disappearance. Jesse hasn't spoken a coherent sentence in 3 years. But he still draws black circles every day. His doctors tried to take away the markers once. He smeared blood on the padded wall until they gave them back. They've started to notice something. The circles are changing. Subtle differences, like small glyphs forming in the edges, barely visible but consistent. Some appear to be repeating patterns. One psychiatrist tried running them through a translation software used for ancient dialects. Got one word back, below. In the past 6 months, 4 more sinkholes have opened near the old site. One swallowed a grazing cow, another a retired oil drum truck. Each is rimmed with the same unnatural black stone. Navarro shut down the entire field quietly. Locals say at night you can see a soft glow rising from the deeper holes. Not bright, more like a dull orange pulse, like something breathing slow and steady underneath the earth. A group of amateur geologists visited one last spring, posted a video online, shaky and muffled. One of them dropped a flare into the deepest shaft. It didn't clatter or echo, just vanished. No sound, no bottom. They didn't post anything else after that. Their account went dark 2 days later. Some say the thing they drilled into wasn't oil at all, not even geological. It was deeper than the Earth's memory, older than the stone itself. Something waiting, not sleeping, feeding maybe. 1 inch at a time. The rest of Cuyanosa pretends the field doesn't exist now. The roads to the pad are cracked, half buried under drifting sand. But if you follow the old fence line west of town, you'll find the edge of it. And sometimes just before dawn, you'll hear something rising. Not loud, not violent, just present. A sound like heavy breathing from deep inside the earth. And if you stay long enough and close your eyes, you might start to see the circles 2 dot. They say it helps if you draw them. Helps it find you faster. Everyone in Mitchell County had heard the stories. Warnings passed down at bonfires and whispered in the low light of gas stations off the I-20 corridor. They weren't written in any official capacity, no road signs, no tourist advisories, but folks just knew. You don't stop for hitchhikers after dark. Not past mile marker 352, that stretch of highway between Sweetwater and Colorado City, where the wind never seemed to stop blowing and the mesquite trees bent in directions they shouldn't, had a reputation. Some said it was haunted, others said cursed, but no one could explain why. They just knew things went missing out there. People too. Jared Ellis didn't care about old wives' tales. He was 17, restless and full of that stubborn West. Texas defiance that made him believe rules were for other people. It was a Friday night in late October when he drove out past Big Spring to visit a girl he'd met at a livestock show. The visit didn't go as planned. Turns out she already had a boyfriend, and just like the attention, so by 10:30 he was back on the road, headed east toward home. The land around him rolled out flat and silent, only the moon in his eye, beams cutting through the dark. He had music going, windows cracked just enough to let in the dry air and the scent of sagebrush drifting faintly inside. His Ford Ranger, a hand-me-down from his uncle, rattled on the uneven asphalt. He'd just passed marker 349 when he saw the figure. A man standing at the side of the road, thumbs stuck out. He looked out of place, like a glitch in the landscape. He wasn't slouched or swaying like most drifters Jared had seen. He stood perfectly still, spine straight, arms relaxed, and he was smiling. It was a broad, fixed smile, like he'd been waiting. Like he knew someone would stop. Jared eased off the gas and coasted to a stop about 10 yards ahead. His heart beat a little faster, maybe from nerves, maybe from the thrill of doing something reckless. He told himself it was fine. Just a guy needing a lift. The man approached with calm, unhurried steps. When he opened the passenger door and climbed in, Jared noticed a few things all at once. He was tall, maybe 6'5", with skin the color of sand, thin lips stretched wide over very white teeth. He wore an old suit, black, dusty, and slightly too big, like something a preacher might be buried in. He didn't say a word. Jared cleared his throat. "Where you headed?" The man turned his head slowly, still smiling, and met Jared's eyes. His pupils were enormous, swallowing the brown of his irises, and he didn't blink. Not once. East, the man said. His voice was low, almost too low, like it had to travel a long way just to make it out of his throat. Jared nodded. Well, that's where I'm going. They drove on mile after mile, silence stretching between them. The radio buzzed with static, and when Jared tried to switch stations, they were all the same nothing but garbled voices and hiss. The air inside the truck grew cold. Jared checked the vents, but the AC was off. He rolled up the windows, but the chill didn't go away. He could see his breath. He glanced sideways. The man hadn't moved. Still smiling. Still staring straight ahead. Something about the way he sat too still. Too straight started to gnaw at Jared. He kept sneaking looks, trying not to be obvious. No blinking, no shifting. No signs of life except the occasional slow inhale. Jared gripped the steering wheel tighter. So, you from around here? No answer. What were you doing out on the highway? Silence. But the man kept smiling. The truck rolled past marker 351, then 352. The wind outside picked up, howling over the flatland like it was angry, pushing against the truck hard enough to make it sway. Up ahead, in the distance, Jared saw a faint orange glow. A fire? A flare? As they got closer, he saw it was a gas station. It looked abandoned. Windows broken, one pump leaning at an odd angle, but the overhead lights were on and flickering. There was no movement. No cars, just a weird still quiet hanging in the air. Jared slowed down. You want me to drop you here? The man didn't respond, but Jared had had enough. He pulled into the lot, tires crunching over broken glass, and stopped beside the darkened storefront. The man turned his head again slowly. That smile never left his face. Thank you, he said. And then he got out. Jared exhaled, feeling his chest loosen for the first time in half an hour. He didn't watch the man walk away. He just waited for the door to shut and the weight to lift from the passenger side. It didn't. Jared turned, confused. The door was open. The seat was empty, but the man was still sitting there, exactly as he had been. Same suit, same wide smile. Still staring forward, Jared's stomach turned. He blinked hard and looked again. The passenger seat was undeniably vacant. The door swung fully open. The man wasn't in the truck, and yet he was frozen in place like a shadow burned into his mind. He could feel the presence, heavy and cold, right beside him. The air smelled different now, like damp earth and rust. Jared reached over and slammed the door shut, then floored it, peeling out of the lot and back onto the highway. He didn't look back. Not until a few miles later, when curiosity got the better of him. He glanced into the rearview mirror. Nothing. He started to relax again. Maybe it had been a trick of the light. Maybe the guy was just weird, and the stress of the long drive and the failed date was messing with his head. Then the engine sputtered. The Ranger coughed, stuttered, and died. Jared coasted to the shoulder and tried the ignition. Nothing. Dashboard dead. Headlights flickering. And in the darkness, mile marker 352 loomed just a few feet ahead. He sat still for a long moment, trying not to panic. He reached for his phone. No signal, screen frozen. Then he felt it, that cold, that pressure. The passenger seat creaked slightly, as if someone had just sat down, but it was still empty. He turned his head, slowly, like in a nightmare, and saw the man standing outside the window. Smiling. No. Blinking. Just staring at him through the glass. Jared hit the lock button. Too late. The door opened without a sound, and the man climbed back inside. Jared couldn't move, couldn't scream, could barely breathe. The man leaned in close, his face inches from Jared's. His eyes were too big. His skin was too dry. His teeth weren't right. They looked old, worn down, cracked. You brought me here, the man whispered, "Now I'll take you back." And everything went black. They found Jared's truck 3 days later, abandoned just past mile marker 352. The driver's door was open, keys still in the ignition. No sign of Jared, no blood, no footprints, only the smell of rust and cold air that didn't belong in July, and a smiley face drawn in dust on the inside of the windshield. No one stopped for hitchhikers after that. Not ever again. They say the Marfa lights are nothing but car headlights, optical illusions dancing on the horizon where Highway 67 cuts across the Chinati Mountains. Scientists came down here with equipment, instruments, and smug explanations. They wrote their papers, satisfied with themselves. But everyone in Presidio County knows better. The locals watch the lights with folded arms and quiet eyes. They don't talk about the second set, the ones that come later, after the usual crowd of tourists and researchers pack up and go back to their hotels. I met Diego Trevino the night before he disappeared. He was 32, out of Austin, a drone photographer who ran a YouTube channel full of sweeping aerial shots and time-lapse videos set to ambient music. Diego wasn't a nut job or some amateur thrill seeker. He was clean, methodical, ex-military. His footage had an almost clinical precision. He'd been out to Marfa once before and caught the standard lights, blue-white, flickering, dancing erratically. He called them beautiful noise. But this time, he wanted something else. He'd heard about the second lights from an old man in Valentine over beers. Dull red, slow-moving, like lanterns underwater. The old man didn't want to talk at first, but when Diego bought him a few lone stars, he opened up and told him about how they'd appear between 2 and 3 in the morning, just 4 or 5 of them, hovering low along an arroyo south of Highway 90. They didn't flicker or flash. They drifted in silence, always westward. The old man said his cousin followed them once and came back wrong. Diego didn't believe in ghosts or aliens or skinwalkers, but he believed in rare footage. He stayed at the Riata Inn on the edge of town, spent 2 days scouting with maps and infrared scopes. I bumped into him at the Marfa Burrito early on a Thursday morning. He had that kind of focused energy that made you feel like he wasn't really listening. He asked me if I'd seen them. I told him I'd seen the regular. Lights plenty, but never stuck around for anything else. He nodded, took his burrito, and left. That was the last anyone saw him until Sunday evening. His rental car was found abandoned 10 miles west of the Marfa Lights viewing area, one of the border. Patrol drones picked up a heat signature in the brush but lost it after a few minutes. They found his drone rig smashed to hell about 300 yards off the road. No footage on the SD card. Just static, like it had been jammed or shorted mid-flight. The local sheriff assumed Diego had wandered off, got lost, or dehydrated. The desert's unforgiving at night. People disappear all the time out here. But then, Sunday rolled around, late afternoon. Cloudless sky, windless heat that shimmered off the pavement. A couple from Odessa saw him walking down the middle of 90 barefoot, clothes torn, sunburned to the bone. He was muttering in Spanish fluent, rapid native sounding. EMS picked him up and brought him to Big Bend Regional. The weirdest part? Diego didn't speak Spanish. He'd grown up in Lubbock, second-generation Mexican-American, but never learned it. His parents had tried, but he'd refused as a kid. Everyone he worked with said he didn't even like Spanish music. But now, he spoke it perfectly and refused to speak a word of English. I drove down to see him myself. We'd spoken maybe 5 minutes total, but something about the whole thing stuck with me. I got in as press told the nurse I was writing a piece on missing persons in the Big Bend region. She let me see him under supervision. He didn't recognize me, but I knew it was him. Same sharp jawline, same lean frame. His eyes, though, those were wrong. Darker somehow. Not just tired or haunted, but sunken like something had taken root. Behind them and pushed the real Diego back. He looked out the window the whole time, never glanced at the camera in the corner. When I asked if he remembered anything, he whispered something, just one word: Elos. Them. The nurse said he hadn't looked at a single reflective surface since they brought him in. No mirrors, no screens, no glass. They tried to do a neurological exam and he nearly broke an orderly's fingers trying to get away from the MRI. After 2 weeks, they moved him to a private facility in El Paso. Word is he stopped talking entirely after that, but that's not the end of it. About a month later, I got a call from a state trooper named Rodriguez who'd been on patrol south of Alpine. He was responding to a report of gunshots near a dry creek bed and spotted movement in the brush. When he approached, he saw something strange, 5 red lights, low to the ground, maybe 10 feet in the air, drifting west. No sound. Not even wind. His dash cam caught nothing. The body cam glitched out for 15 seconds, just a wash of static and pixel smearing. Rodriguez said the lights didn't float, they pulled, like gravity in reverse, like they were attached to something beneath the earth, dragging whatever it was behind them. He got this look when he told me, like he wasn't sure if he should even be saying it out loud. When I asked if he followed them, he shook his head, said the air felt wrong, like being underwater and inhaling dry sand. He turned around and didn't look back. I started digging. Cross-referenced missing persons reports with sightings of the second lights. Patterns emerged, sparse but consistent. Roughly every 11 months, they appear for 3 to 4 nights. Always in the same general area, but never at the exact same spot. People who follow them vanish. Most don't come back. Those that do are ... altered. One rancher near Redford walked out of the desert naked after 5 days. Couldn't speak. Skin mottled with circular burns like sucker marks. He spent the next year building wind chimes out of copper wire and broken mirrors. Hung them from every tree on his property. Blew his own brains out last spring. Another woman, a geology grad student from UNT, vanished in 2009. Found in 2012 outside a rest stop near Marathon. She wouldn't go indoors, said the walls bend in there. She wore a necklace made of teeth, none of them human. She's institutionalized now, won't let anyone turn off the lights in her room. It's not just lights. It's something older, something that doesn't care if you believe in it. I think about Diego sometimes, how calm he looked in that hospital bed. Like he'd made peace with something too big to explain. I tried reaching out to his family. They don't talk. To reporters. His YouTube channel's gone. No backups, no archives. The desert swallowed it all. 3 weeks ago, I went back out there. Drove to the same arroyo the old man had told Diego about. Waited until after 2 a.m. Wind was dead. Coyotes were quiet. The normal Marfa lights came and went, blue and white, flickering like they were playing. Then, just as I was about to leave, I saw them. 5, low, red. No flicker. Just a slow, smooth glide. Not fast, not urgent, methodical. They drifted west, hugging the scrub and stone. I held my phone up to record and the screen went black. Not off, just black. I didn't feel scared, not exactly. It was worse than that. I felt like I was being seen, examined, like something was behind my eyes, reading me like a page. I don't remember getting back to the car. When I checked my watch, 2 hours had passed. My tires were coated in fine gray dust that didn't match the dirt around their dots. Since then, I haven't been able to dream. Or maybe I have, but I don't remember. All I know is I wake up every night at 2:17 a.m., sweating. My mirrors crackle with static when I walk by. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear a voice whisper in fluent, rapid Spanish. Ellos vienen del suelo, y los seguiste. They come from the ground, and you followed them. The locals don't drive FM 1053 after midnight. You can laugh at that if you're not from around here. Folks from Austin or Dallas or one of those glass and steel cities always think these little West Texas legends are just mesquite scented, fairy tales told over long-neck beers. But you ask someone who grew up in Fort Stockton or out near Grand Falls, and their face will change when you mention 1053. Their eyes get real quiet, because they know it's a 2-lane blacktop that threads through nothing. Just dry hills and barbed wire and 100 miles of dust between Fort Stockton and Imperial. You drive it, and you start to feel like the whole damn world got scrubbed. Out around you, no cell service. No lights, unless you count the ones you bring with you. And sometimes, especially when the sky's low and the wind smells like ozone and iron, the pavement changes. People started calling it the Bleeding Road maybe 20 years back, though the first reports go further. Dark stains bloom along the center line, deep, rust-colored splotches that look like something wet soaked up from underneath. They don't puddle like oil or spread like antifreeze. They just seep up out of the cracks in the pavement in patterns that are wrong somehow. Like veins.txdot says it's iron oxide, runoff from old pipes or minerals bleeding out of the rock. But there aren't any pipes along that stretch, and if there's groundwater anywhere out there, no one's found it. Nothing should be leaking, but it does, especially in the late summer months, right after sundown. You'll be driving and suddenly the headlights catch it, a wet shine across the road, thick as molasses and redder than any rust you've ever seen. Most people keep going. They roll over it with a thump of the tires, pretend they didn't see anything, and don't slow down. But every so often, someone stops. That's what Tommy Leal did in '06. Tommy was a tow truck driver out of Fort Stockton, worked for Red's Garage just past the high school. Big guy, maybe 6'3", strong as hell, but not the brightest. Good man, though. He was coming back from Imperial just after 1 in the morning, pulling a dead F-150 that had broken down outside of Coyanosa. Road was empty. No wind, not even crickets. Just his headlights carving out a yellow tunnel through the dark. Then he saw it, a smear across both lanes, maybe 20 feet wide. The color was off too dark, too red. Looked fresh. His first thought was a wreck, even though he hadn't passed anybody. He stopped, flipped on his flashers, and stepped out. Said the air smelled wrong. Not like blood exactly, but close. Like iron and heat and something sour underneath, like spoiled meat left in the sun. He walked up to the stain, squatted down with his flashlight. That's when he saw them. Handprints, not tire marks. Not oil, but prints, dozens of them, pressed into the red like someone had been crawling through it. Palms flat, fingers splayed wide like they'd been trying to pull themselves off the road, dragging away from the center line toward the shoulder. Only no foot tracks, no knees, just hands. He followed them maybe 10 yards before they just stopped. No trail into the brush, no sign of anything getting up. Just ended. He said the edges looked like they'd sunk into the asphalt, like the pavement had been soft and the hands had pressed in deep before hardening again. Then he noticed something worse. No bugs, not one. No mosquitoes, no moths in the headlights. No flies buzzing the red stain, and the silence. He said it was like standing inside a coffin. Dead air, like the sound got sucked out of it. Tommy said he got this pressure behind his eyes, like something was watching him from the dark, just past the reach of his lights. He turned, walked fast back to the truck, didn't run because he didn't want to know what might happen if he did. He got in, locked the doors, hit the gas, and didn't stop until he saw the lights of Fort Stockton. He told Red and some of the other guys at the garage the next morning. Most of them laughed, said he'd been out too long in the sun or maybe had a flask in the cab, but he wasn't joking. He quit the job a week later, moved up to Amarillo. Never came back out after that. More stories started trickling in. A school teacher heading to a funeral in Crane said she saw something dragging itself across the road late one night, right past mile marker 238. Said it moved like a person, but wrong too fast with its arms, the legs trailing behind like they were broken. She hit the gas and didn't stop. The next day, there was a reddish smear across both lanes, maybe 30 feet long, with drag marks in the center. DPS wrote it off as roadkill. A rancher found his heifers gathered near the fence line, staring out toward the highway. 4 of them dead, no wounds, just dead, eyes wide. He said the ground near the fence was warm to the touch, even though it had rained the night before and cooled everything else off. But the worst story came from a guy named Curtis Wren, who worked TXDOT maintenance. He and a crew were sent to repave a section of 1053 in 2014. That same stretch near mile marker 238. The plan was simple. Grind off the surface layer, lay new asphalt, be done in 2 days. They started just after sunup. By noon, Curtis said the machinery started acting up. Big grinder kept stalling out, wouldn't dig into the blacktop right, like the teeth were slipping. Then his foreman went down into the trench they'd cut, maybe 2 inches deep, to check for moisture, and he shouted something back about weird discoloration under the surface. Curtis climbed down to look, said it looked like veins, red and branching, like the capillaries under your skin, but running through the stone. When he touched it, the pavement felt warm, like a fever. Then it pulsed. Just once. That night, Curtis woke up back at his motel screaming. No one else remembered anything after they packed up for the day. The equipment never worked right again. TXDOT blamed faulty mix and bad aggregates, but they never repaved that section. If you drive it now, you can still see the seam where their work stopped. Still see the red bloom rising through the new blacktop, like something underneath is trying to breathe. They say the road was built on old land, older than Comanche, older than the Spanish, a place where things were buried and not meant to be disturbed. There's an old Pecos tribal myth about a blood road that ran across the desert, paved with the bones of the hungry dead. They say if you travel it too long, you forget where you're going. Start dreaming of fire, of teeth in the dirt. I drove that road once. Only once. Long drive back from Monahan's, middle of July, heat rising off the hills in shimmering curtains. I hit the bleeding stretch around 11:50 p.m., saw it shimmering red in my high beams like a wound in the dark. I stopped, just for a second, just to look, and I swear to God I saw movement, right at the center of the road where the stain was thickest. Not a person, not an animal, just hands, pale and wet, pressing up from under the pavement, fingers straining, nails scraping at the cracks, like something buried deep was trying to crawl out and couldn't quite reach the surface. I didn't breathe, didn't move. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The hands sank back down. The stain faded, but the silence stayed. I don't drive that way anymore. Nobody should. There were stories about the desert outside Terlingua, the kind most people laughed off until nightfall, when the wind cut sideways across the broken ridges and even the coyotes stayed quiet. They called that part of the Big Bend Dead Tongue, a flat nowhere marked by scrubrush, rock piles, and the slow decay of old mining roads that led to nowhere. And for the last 40 years, There had been a whisper among truckers and ham operators about a voice that sometimes cut through the CB bands on Channel 19 during dead airlow. Trembling, scratchy with age, but undeniably human. Breaker, this is Sheriff Calhoun. I'm out past the tracks near Mule Ear Springs, please. Respond, I repeat. This is Sheriff Calhoun, they're not people, tell my Wi-Fi. Then static. Always static, and the oddest thing? Sheriff Emery Calhoun had died out there in 1983. The old-timers remembered when his patrol truck was found melted into the desert floor like it had sunk into tar. No body, just his badge, curled from heat, lying on the front seat like someone placed it there after the fire went cold. Some said he'd gone off the rails, wandered into the sun, maybe chased a coyote into a crevice and never came out. But those who'd known him well, men like Dutch Farland, who'd worked dispatch back then, swore Calhoun wasn't the kind to lose his way. He was stone sober, too serious for jokes, and he knew those desert roads like the lines on his palm. Nobody wanted to talk about what happened that week in 1983 when 3 locals went missing alongside Calhoun. A prospector named Langley, a mechanic named Ruse, and a boy barely 18 named Ellis who delivered groceries to the outskirt ranches. All gone. One of their trucks found turned on its side in a washout, filled with sand, no signs of struggle. No blood. The other 2 just vanished. The investigation dried up fast, and no one could ever explain that radio signal. I heard it myself once. In the fall of 2019, I was parked at a rest stop just north of Terlingua, tuning the CB for storm reports. I'd been driving south from Marfa after chasing a lead on some land my uncle left me near the Rio Grande. The night was clean and cold, the kind that feels thinner than it should be, like something's been pulled out of it. The air barely moved, and the stars above were so thick they looked bruised. I remember I was halfway through a warm bottle of Dr. Pepper when the signal cut in. Not people, tell my wife. Then just a whining screech that made my fillings ache, followed by absolute silence. I sat there with my hand frozen over the dial, the sound of my own breathing loud in the cab. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove into Terlingua proper, the town like a postcard from some forgotten time. Buildings that leaned against the wind, old cafe signs sun-bleached. To bone, and locals who watched you too long before speaking. I found the sheriff's office, one-room structure with a bell that hadn't worked in decades, and asked about Calhoun. The deputy behind the desk was no more than 25 and wore his hat too big. "Sheriff Calhoun?" he said. "You're about 40 years too late, friend. That man's a ghost story." "Why you asking?" I told him about the signal. His face didn't change, but he leaned forward. "You hear it in the desert?" he asked. I nodded. He glanced at the map pinned to the wall behind him. It was faded, but one section near the bottom had been circled in black ink, then scribbled over with a red marker. "No labels. Don't go that way," he said. I did anyway. That's the truth of it. Whatever was waiting out there, I had to see for myself. Maybe it was the way the voice sounded. Not just scared, broken. As if even in death, Calhoun hadn't found peace. I followed the old mining road out past Mule Ear Springs. The land turned meaner the farther I went. Boulders shaped like twisted teeth, sunburned cliffs, dry arroyos, littered with bones both animal and not. The truck's GPS died somewhere around the second cattle guard, and the radio turned to static. I kept driving until I reached a rusted gate set into a stretch of chain link that didn't make sense. It ran along the desert for maybe 100 feet in either direction, ending at sheer rock. No buildings. No signs. Just the gate, closed with a heavy padlock. And beside the gate, a shack made of corrugated metal. Door missing. Inside, an old, CB radio bolted to a table, microphone dangling. Dust thick as wool on every surface. Then, as I stepped in, the CB flared to life. This is Sheriff Calhoun, IM. Near the old fence line, They keep changing faces, Don't believe him, Tell. My wife, I static again. But this time I heard something else. Just beneath the static, like a layer beneath the sound breathing. Wet and strained, I backed out of the shack slowly and turned toward the gate. Something stood beyond it. I saw it only briefly, maybe half. A second. Tall, the color of sandstone, too thin for any human. It moved without walking, gliding over the cracked earth toward the fence, and its face, No, not a face. It wore faces. Three, shifting over its skull like hands trying on masks. A woman, a boy, then a burned. Expressionless thing with empty sockets and a mouth too wide. I ran. My truck was 50 yards away, and I don't remember getting inside, only the engine roaring as I kicked it into reverse, tires clawing at the dirt. Behind me, the CB crackled again, but the voice wasn't Calhoun's anymore. It was mine. This is ... and I'm near the old fence line, they single quotes, not people, they single quotes, not people, tell my wife. Then silence. The signal didn't follow me after that day, not directly. But things changed. At night, when I sleep, I hear it. Sometimes I wake with my hand reaching for a radio I don't own. Other times, the lights in my home flicker, and I swear I smell the desert-hot sand, scorched metal. Old blood. I did some digging afterward, spent months on it. Found an old maintenance man who once worked for a short-lived research outfit based near Terlingua in the 70s. Said they were studying radio interference, but he claimed it was a cover. The real focus was non-human signal retention. He wouldn't explain what that meant, just said they packed up and vanished in '82 after something answered back. A week later, Calhoun disappeared. His wife, Lorna, died in a care home in 2007. She never remarried. Her last words, according to the nurse, were, "He's still calling. He's still out there." I don't know what Calhoun found or what found him. Maybe it's some artifact of the land, something ancient that never knew the shape of a man until one got too close. Maybe it lives in the radio waves now, using voices like bait, pulling people in until they become part of it. Maybe the others, Langley, Ruse, Ellis, are in there too. Their souls caught like flies in amber, screaming just beneath the static. Sometimes I turn the dial late at night just to see. I don't know what I'm hoping to hear, but if I ever hear my own voice again, saying words I haven't spoken yet, I'll know it's too late. That thing, whatever it is, doesn't kill you fast. It traps you. Makes you part of the signal. And out there, near that broken shack and the rusted gate, something still waits, wearing his badge, using his voice, calling for help that will never come. He was low on gas and even lower on sleep. Hadn't seen another car in over an hour. The West Texas 2-lane stretched out in front of him like a ribbon of dark. Empty nothing. The kind of road that made you feel like you'd driven off it. Map. He was about 10 miles outside of Sanderson, at least. That's what the rusted sign he passed an hour ago said. A storm was building on the horizon, huge clouds backlit by distant flashes of lightning, and the temperature was dropping. Fast, the kind of sudden desert chill that sinks into your bones and makes your teeth ache. He didn't want to pull over, didn't want to get stuck out here, not with the gas gauge needle tapping the red. Then he saw it. A gas station, lit up like a birthday cake in the middle of the desert. No name, no brand, just a squat square. Building with flickering fluorescent lights and 2 old pumps out front. The kind of place that shouldn't be open. But it was. The lights buzzed and glowed against the black sky, and a single bulb over the door cast a cone of yellow light onto the oil-stained concrete. One of the pumps had a hand-scrawled out-of-order sign taped to it. The other was working. He pulled up, killed the engine, and got out. The air smelled like ozone and gasoline, and there was a sound like a low hum, maybe electrical, maybe just the wind threading through the station's eaves. Inside the building, behind the smudged glass of the front window, a man stood behind the counter. He wore a blue shirt with a name patch, though the name was too faded to read. The man didn't smile, didn't wave, just raised one arm slowly and pointed toward the pump. No words. Just the gesture. The man nodded, a little unsettled, and swiped his card. The pump screen was old, green digits flickering, but it took the payment. He filled his tank. The numbers ticked up slowly. When he was done, he looked back toward the window. The attendant was still there, still watching. He gave a quick wave. The man inside didn't react, just kept staring through the glass, unmoving. He got back in his car and drove. Didn't stop again until he reached Sanderson. Checked into a motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon and wallpaper that peeled at the corners. He didn't even tell the clerk about the station. Just got his key and passed out on the stiff bed, letting the TV play itself to sleep. It was 2 days later when he thought about it again. He'd left his phone charger at the gas station. He remembered setting it down on the concrete by the pump while he filled the tank, meant to pick it back up before driving off, but the strange silence of the place must have distracted him. He had time to kill and decided to backtrack. Was curious too. Wanted to get another look at that weird little station. Something about it had been nagging at him, but when he reached the spot, he recognized the stretch of road, the bend, the rocky outcrop just before the incline. There was nothing there. Just an empty patch of land, cracked asphalt, scrub brush, and a few old beer bottles scattered in the dirt. Not even a foundation, no building, no sign that a station had ever existed. The tire marks on the road were his. That was it. He got out of the car and walked around, trying to convince himself he'd taken a wrong turn, that maybe it was a different road. But he knew it wasn't. This was the spot. There was nothing. Back in Sanderson, he stopped at a diner. An old woman was sitting at the counter, sipping coffee with shaking hands. He told her about the station, where it was, what it looked like. Asked her if it had closed recently. She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at him for a long time with eyes that had seen too much. Then she said, "That place burned down in '91. Took the clerk with it." He laughed at first, thought she was kidding. But she didn't laugh. Just stared at her coffee like she could see something in it. Something from a long way off. It was called Murphy's, she went on. Old man ran it. Son worked the night shift. One night, pump caught fire. Whole place went up like kindling. They found the father out back, burned bad but alive. Son never made it out. They said he got trapped behind the counter. But folks round here, they say he didn't want to leave. The waitress came by, topped off the old woman's cup, and gave the man a cautious look. "Don't listen to her," she said quietly. "People like their ghost stories out here." But something about the way she said it, the twitch at the corner of her mouth, the tightness in her voice, told him. She wasn't convinced either. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the clerk's face behind the glass, blank still, the way he hadn't moved at all. Not when the pump started, not when it stopped. Just that slow, deliberate gesture. Pointing. He tried to write it off. Stress, exhaustion. The tricks your brain plays in the dark. But the next morning he checked his trunk. His phone charger was there, covered in ash. The first time David Everly heard about the black '78 Cadillac, he was elbow deep in an oil change at his uncle's garage just off the edge of Lubbock, Texas. One of the regulars, an older trucker named Harris, was sipping lukewarm coffee and shooting the breeze about ghost lights on Highway 62. Harris said he saw something once just past Hobbs, a little after 3:30 in the morning, when the only thing out there was oil derricks creaking in the dark and the dust riding the wind like a living thing. Big black caddy, Harris had said. Old, gleaming, like someone just pulled it off a showroom floor back in '78. It's behind you. Don't pass, don't honk, don't nothing. Just stays there, like it's waiting. David laughed it off at the time. Chalked it up to late hours and too much caffeine. Truckers had a way of turning highway loneliness into stories that would keep your mind busy while the road slipped by under the wheels. But the seed was planted. That detail 333 stuck with him like a burr. Too precise to be casual. 2. Strange to ignore. He didn't think about it much again until weeks later when he found himself driving back from Carlsbad, New Mexico. It was early summer, warm even at night, the sky dusted with stars and the moon hanging low and orange as if soaked in rust. He'd stayed later than planned, visiting a woman he wasn't supposed to be seeing, and by the time he crossed the state line back into Texas, it was just past 3 in the morning. His phone read 3:27 when he passed the broken-down gas station. On the outskirts of Plains, where the rusted sign still creaked in the wind even though the pumps had been dry for years, by the time it hit 3:33, he was alone on US 62, flat fields stretching into the black void on either side of the highway. And the only sound was the hum of his tires and the whisper of wind curling around the side mirrors. That's when he saw headlights flare in the rearview. At first, it didn't register. Just another car, maybe. A trucker, maybe even a sheriff's cruiser coming up behind. But as the minutes ticked by, the headlights stayed the same distance. Behind him, no closer, no farther. When he sped up to 75, they did too. When he slowed to 60, they matched. Always the same distance, like they were tethered to him. A chill crept up David's arms. He flicked on the high beams, but there was nothing ahead but miles of empty road. The Cadillac, because that's what it was, he could tell, now remained behind him, low slung and wide, the chrome grille catching faint moonlight. It was immaculate. Black paint so dark it seemed to drink in the night. He tried to brush off the rising panic. It's a coincidence, he told himself. Just someone going the same way. But then he remembered what Harris said. If you pull over, it does too, but no one gets out, ever. David's heart thumped, louder than the tires. He wanted to pull over, just to prove it wrong, just to laugh at himself. He waited another minute, chewing the inside of his cheek. Then he eased onto the gravel shoulder and came to a full stop. The Cadillac did the same. 100 feet back, but it was clear. It slowed, then pulled over. No hesitation, no confusion. Like it had been expecting the stop, he stared at it through the mirror. Nothing moved. The windows were too dark to see inside. No door opened. No lights flickered. No engine sound. Just stillness. After nearly a minute, just as he was reaching for the gear shift, the Cadillac blinked its headlights once. Not a flash. Not an accident. A slow, deliberate blink. David's chest tightened. He pressed the gas and pulled back onto the highway, his tires kicking up loose gravel. The caddy followed without delay. By the time he reached Seminole, his hands were shaking. He didn't stop. Not even when he passed an all-night gas station where he usually filled up. He was afraid if he stopped again, the caddy might do more. Then blink. Might do something final. As he entered the town proper, lights returned, street lamps, neon signs, a Whataburger still glowing with late-night customers. When he turned into a neighborhood, the Cadillac didn't follow. It simply vanished. One moment, he saw it trailing him down the highway. The next, it was gone. He didn't talk about it. Not to his uncle, not to his buddies. What could he say? That a ghost car followed him down a West Texas highway in the dead of night? They'd laugh, or worse, start watching him like something was broken inside. But then it happened again, and again, it became a pattern. Whenever he drove alone on US 62 after 3:33 a.m., the black Cadillac would appear behind him. Always behind. Always at the same distance. Never passing. Never speeding up. And if he stopped even for a second longer than a minute, it would blink. Other people started talking. Not to him directly, but he overheard stories. A woman at the diner in Brownfield whispering about her brother who hadn't been seen since last month. Said he left Hobbs at 3 in the morning and never made it home. Cops found his car outside. An abandoned grain elevator. Doors open. Keys still in the ignition. No sign of him. No footprints. No struggle. Just gone. David started to piece it together. Every account followed the same rules. Alone on the highway after 3:33, the Cadillac appears. If you ignore it, drive on, you're fine. But if you stop for too long enough for it to blink, something changes. He became obsessed. Started driving the route on purpose, watching the clock. Taking notes. Testing limits. He'd drive at 3:32, nothing. At 3:34, headlights. At 3:35, blinked out one night, parked just off a farm road near Caprock. He let it blink. Once, twice, 3 times. On the third blink, his headlights cut out. Not flickered. Not dimmed. Went completely dark. The radio screeched with static, loud and sharp like a scream underwater. The air turned cold, and the smell of burning oil filled the cab. Then silence. He turned the key. The truck didn't respond. Not even a click. In the rear view, the Cadillac was closer now. 50 feet. Then 30. It hadn't moved, and yet it was closer. He got out and ran. Didn't even grab his phone. He sprinted into the field, away from the highway, tripping over roots and rocks until he collapsed under the black stretch of sky, panting and alone. When he returned after sunrise, the Cadillac was gone. His truck started like nothing had happened, but he'd changed. The next morning, he looked older. Lines in his face that hadn't been there before. Hair going gray at the temples. His fingernails had gone brittle. His teeth ached. He slept. During the day now and at night, he felt something behind him even when he wasn't driving. A presence. Watching. Then the dreams began. Always the same. Him in the passenger seat of the Cadillac, unable to move. Headlights cutting through endless dark. The driver invisible. He tried to scream, but there was never a sound. Just the soft thrum of the tires and the low growl of the engine, steady and eternal. He's not the only one. People have disappeared. Others speak of it in whispers. Some even try to find it. The bold ones, the foolish ones. They treat it like a legend, a dare. But David knows better. It's not a car. It's not even a ghost. It's a ritual. Something ancient wears that car like a skin. Something patient, bound to time, not place. 3:33 a.m. is its hour. US 62 is just its favorite road. There are rules, yes, but not mercy. And if you see it, if the black Cadillac appears behind you, you have one job. Don't stop. No matter what. He wasn't the kind of YouTuber who screamed into the camera or chased shadows for views. Daniel Lang was quiet, deliberate. Former small-town journalist turned content creator after the paper back home folded and the internet started paying more than bylines. His channel, Echo Roads, had a small but devoted audience who loved the way he let silence breathe, the way he'd pan slowly across the remnants of forgotten places. Ghost towns, shuttered mines, collapsed schools, the kinds of places where time pooled instead of moved. He found Barstow on an old county map folded in the back of a library. Book on Texas ghost settlements. It wasn't even circled. Just a faint smear of ink near the western edge of Jeff Davis County, south of Valentine. No wiki page, no population listed. Just Barstow, not the bigger one up near Pecos, but something else entirely. A mistake, maybe. Or a duplication. That made it even better. Daniel planned the trip like he always did. Charged his 2 cameras, packed extra batteries, a battery pack, drone, GoPros, lav mic. One night at a motel in Alpine, then west to the spot on the map. About an hour into desert scrub with no signage. No cell service past Fort Davis. No gas stations, no ranchers, no animals. He filmed the entire drive-in. The road narrowed, then turned to gravel, then to cracked, sun-beaten pavement with grass growing up the middle. Around a bend between 2 ridges of burnt red rock, Barstow appeared without warning. No city limit sign, no welcome plaque. Just a street that widened like a dead artery and houses that still stood upright. Sun-faded but untouched by collapse, Daniel rolled to a stop and muttered something into the mic. The dashcam caught it. No way this place is dead. He stepped out, camera in hand, and scanned the street. There were maybe 20 houses, all single-story, ranch style. No wind, no birds, no distant hum of insects. But the first thing that unsettled him wasn't the silence. It was the stillness of the cars. 4 of them were parked along the street. An old white Tacoma, a maroon SUV, a dented Civic, and a station wagon with sun-bleached paint. All clean, all without dust on the windshields. As if they'd been driven here this morning. Daniel approached the house on the corner. The front door was ajar. No sign of forced entry, no weathering on the hinges. Inside, the kitchen lights were still on. There was a plate on the table with a sandwich on it, 1 bite taken. The bread wasn't moldy. No rot. A glass of milk beside it, still halfway full, just starting to form a skin on top. He looked at the camera, whispered, "This isn't abandoned." He didn't stage things. He never had to. But now, for the first time, he hesitated before moving. He called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" Nothing. He walked deeper into the house. The TV in the living room was on a static screen, frozen. Not the kind of static you get from no signal, but more like a paused VHS to show a black and white sitcom had stopped mid-laugh. He stepped back outside and tried another house. Similar. A bowl of cereal in the sink. Shoes by the door. Air still faintly cool, as if the AC had only recently shut off. He entered 3 more homes in the next 30 minutes. Everyone the same. Signs of life, meals half-eaten, power still running, but no people. No pets. No bodies. He turned the camera on himself for a moment. He looked pale, squinting against the brightness. "I don't know what I've found here," he said, voice low, "but it doesn't feel like decay. It feels like interruption. Like something hit pause." The post office sat at the center of Barstow. A small, square brick building with metal blinds drawn over the windows. The door wasn't locked. A bell rang as he stepped inside. That sound, recorded on his mic, would later make viewers shiver sharp, clear, clean, as if struck that instant. As if time hadn't dulled it. Inside, he found rows of mailboxes, several of them ajar, letters poking out. The counter still had a stack of manila envelopes. A fan was blowing in the corner, gently rotating. It was the only thing in motion. The footage ends there, abruptly. That's the last thing his subscribers saw. 3 weeks later, a pair of hikers found his van parked just outside the ridgeline. Keys still in the ignition. Battery dead. Ranger dispatch got involved. They found the main camera about 20 yards inside Barstow's limits, lying flat on the road. No sign of Daniel. The recovered footage, released unofficially by someone in the sheriff's department, ran 4 hours. The first 2 were his exploration. The third was glitchy, corrupted, full of sharp bursts of static and momentary blackouts. When the image returned, it showed Daniel standing in the middle of the street, directly facing the camera. Night had fallen. The footage had no audio. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stood there for nearly an hour motionless. His eyes wide open, locked on something unseen, mouth slightly ajar. The light from a nearby street lamp flickered slightly but never failed. At one point, maybe 30 minutes in, he lowered slowly to the ground without breaking eye contact. Laid on his back, eyes still open. The last 10 minutes are just that, him lying in the middle of the street, staring straight into the sky. People argued in the comments about what they saw in his expression. Some said fear, others said awe. A few said they spotted shapes moving at the edge of the frame, shadows that shifted against the direction of the light. One viewer slowed the final frames down to 1/4 speed and swore that in the last second of footage, Daniel's eyes moved not naturally, but like they were pulled sideways, off axis, as if whatever had him was still working inside. A month passed. No new videos. No social media updates. The channel went dark. His family posted a missing persons report and launched a search. They found nothing. Not a trace of him. Not even footprints. Then the letters started arriving. 4 envelopes, each mailed from different towns across the Southwest: El Paso, Marfa, Deming, Alamogordo. Each addressed to Echo Roads with no return address. Inside each was a still photo, old, Polaroid style, grainy, washed out. The first showed the interior of the Barstow post office, but everything inside was covered in thick black vines. Unnatural growth, like mold, but denser. The second showed Daniel's face up close, expression twisted mid-scream, eyes bloodshot and veins bulging, mouth wide open in silent agony. The third showed the street from the final footage, but all. The houses now had lights on, and figures stood in every doorway, watching. The fourth photo was blank at first glance, but when exposed to light, faint shapes began to appear. Faces. Dozens of them, eyes empty, mouths sewn shut, floating just above the texture of the paper. Experts examined the photos and claimed they were fakes. No such plants as the vines. Number. Trace of physical editing but impossible phenomena. As for the camera's final location, no one could explain how it kept running for 4 hours in the heat without shutting down or overheating. The battery, when recovered, was drained, but diagnostics said it should have died after 2, and Barstow? No official record, no property records, no town charter. Google Maps no longer shows a road leading in. The turnoff Daniel used is now just brushland. Rangers who went back later found no houses, no buildings, just a scorched patch of land about. The size of a small town surrounded by miles of nothing. Still, the camera was real. The footage was real. And so were the photos. Some say he never left Barstow, that he became part of it. Others think Barstow wasn't a town at all, just a lure. Something that waited until someone like Daniel came along, someone observant enough to see the stillness but not wise enough to turn back. But every few months, someone on Reddit or some fringe YouTube subreddit posts a new claim. They say there's a humming sound out in the desert past Fort Davis. Low, rhythmic, like a machine breathing. They say they saw a man lying in the middle of a vanished road, staring straight up, eyes glassy and open, and they say the last thing you hear before you see the town is the sound of a post office bell ringing once. It was after midnight when Everett Miles turned his pickup off I-10 and onto Farm Road 1127. A 2-lane stretch of asphalt that rolled west through nothing. The air was flat and still, and the headlights sliced through it like a knife through. Black tar. He'd made this drive 100 times down to visit his brother in Kent, a nowhere town baked into the earth like a forgotten fossil. It was one of those drives where you didn't look at the signs anymore. You just felt the road turn beneath you, familiar in its isolation. Kent was 40 miles ahead, and between here and there was a lot of nothing mesquite, brittle grass, barbed wire fences holding up the night. Everett liked the silence of it. After long weeks welding pipe under the Permian sun, this was where he could think, maybe too much. His wife had left the year before, packed up and gone to Houston without more than a note. His kid barely spoke to him. His father was dying in. Alpine. These were the kinds of thoughts that crawled in when there was too much road and not enough radio signal. Around the 30-mile mark, the road curved near a granite outcrop, and that's when he heard it. Behind him, maybe 100 yards back, a scream tore through the quiet, followed by the crunch of metal, a heavy collision. Everett slammed his brakes and twisted in his seat. In the rear view, the red glow of taillights danced and dust rose. In the beam. He threw the truck in reverse and backed up fast, tires kicking gravel off the shoulder. But there was nothing. He climbed out with his flashlight, the beam shaky in his hand. The air smelled scorched, acrid, and thick like burned rubber, but the road was clean. No car, no wreckage, no scream, just the black highway stretching out behind him, featureless and dead silent again. He walked the shoulder and found something. Even stranger. Tire marks wide, deep grooves etched in black arcs across the pavement, but they didn't follow any logical path. They curved hard and led straight into a wall of rock. There were no skid marks, no debris, no sign of impact. Just the smell, the marks, and a weird set of dark burn patches baked into the asphalt. Like the rubber had fused to the road in a single instant. He stood there a while, waiting for the adrenaline to leave his hands, but it didn't. He radioed. A report to the county sheriff's line, but all he got was static. No signal, just noise. Eventually, convinced maybe he'd misheard something or a truck had swerved and gone on its way, he got back in and kept driving. 10 minutes later, it happened again. Same scream-piercing, wet, desperate. Same crunch of metal. This time, closer. Everett's blood turned cold. He stopped again, heart hammering in his throat. This time he didn't reverse. He stepped out and turned to face the dark stretch behind him, just standing there with the flashlight raised. The dust hadn't even settled yet. The tire marks from before were still there. No fresh tracks, no new wreck, just the same ones and that same scorched smell, stronger now. He walked back to the rock face, putting the beam to it. It was smooth and flat, a solid granite sheet with old drilling scars from some long gone project. But the tire marks didn't lie. They pointed directly into it, like something had driven through the rock itself. Or into it and vanished. He touched the stone. It was hot. Everett backed away slowly, eyes scanning the black horizon. The road was completely empty. He didn't turn the radio back on. He just drove. Another 10 minutes, and again it came. Scream, crunch, silence. He nearly drove off the road. That time, jerking the wheel in shock. His pulse was racing, a cold sweat soaking his shirt. Now he was scared. It wasn't the sound. It was the way it sounded exactly the same. Same cadence, same voice, same metallic rip like steel teeth tearing. A body apart. Not similar, identical, like a recording played at exact intervals. He kept going, but now his hands were shaking worse, and his eyes flicked constantly to the rear view. The burn marks were following him. Every 10 minutes, the sound repeated, and every time he stopped, he found new tire grooves, same size, same arc, always leading into another piece of rock. Always no skid, no debris, no blood. The scream never changed. It was burned into the night like some cursed loop. The fifth time it happened, he didn't stop. He was muttering to himself now, his mind unraveling. It's not real. It's not real. Just some messed up echo, some geological thing. Heat and sound bouncing off the hills. But he didn't believe it. No one would dot by the seventh scream. He realized it had moved ahead of him. It had jumped the road. The sound came from in front now, 100 yards or so. He could see nothing, but the scream burst out of the stillness like a flare, followed by that same grinding metal-on-metal sound. The burn smell hit his nose before the sound ended. His lights illuminated nothing. No car, just empty road. But this time, something caught his eye movement in the peripheral by the fence line. Something low and fast, skimming just beyond the edge of light. He stopped the truck and locked the doors. He didn't breathe. The thing came back into view. About 50 yards down a shimmer, like heat on pavement, but tall, upright, humanoid. It flickered like a glitch, like bad film. Then it was gone. Everett floored the gas and didn't stop again. He reached Kent just after 2 a.m., pale, soaked in sweat, eyes wild. He went straight to the sheriff's office, banged on the glass until Deputy Morales opened the door. She knew. Everett had gone to school with him. She listened to his story with a blank face, then led him inside and poured him coffee. She didn't say much. Not until he was done. Then she leaned back in her chair and asked, "You were coming down 1127? "Yeah." "About 10 miles out, did you pass the old drilling ridge near Saddleback Curve?" He nodded slowly. "That's where I first heard it." She didn't answer right away. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a file. Old newspaper clippings. Yellowed and brittle. She slid one toward him. It was from 1993. A head-on collision on FM 1127. A woman and her daughter, coming back from a birthday party, hit by a drunk in a Silverado. Both killed instantly. No survivors. The man's truck had left deep burn marks on the road, but no one could explain why the vehicle combusted on impact. "Thing is," Morales said, tapping the article, "we've had at least 9 reports. Since then, always the same spot. Same story, screams, crash, no wreck. Some folks see tire marks. Others hear it loop like a tape. We call it the repeater." Everett stared at her. "Why doesn't anyone do anything about it? Who would believe us?" She said, "You think I can call Austin and say ghosts are driving into rocks?" She told him to get some rest, that the thing didn't follow into town. But Everett didn't sleep that night. He stayed at his brother's place with the lights on and every door locked. A week later, he tried to drive back. Just outside Kent, the scream came again. This time, he didn't hear it behind him. It came from the back seat. It started like most nights do in this part of Texas, quiet, dry, and stretching out endlessly under a black sky pocked with stars that seemed colder than usual. I was driving west out of Alpine, the town behind me slowly disappearing into the night like smoke. The 2-lane road that parallels the rail line was empty except for my truck, the occasional armadillo lumbering across, and the sound of wind scraping against the windows. I had just passed the old Mitchell gas stop bin. Closed 10 years now, and was headed out toward nowhere, just enjoying the silence and the feeling of motion. The train didn't make a sound at first. 1 second, I was driving past a wide patch of yucca and creosote, and the next I saw it, a freight engine, dirty and ancient, already crawling across the road maybe a quarter mile ahead. I slowed, surprised I hadn't seen the crossing lights, flash or heard the gate bells. But there it was, trundling across the road at an impossible crawl, its body so long it stretched back into the dark like a shadow being unrolled. I pulled up to the tracks and stopped, figuring I'd wait out the usual 10 or 15 cars. But something felt off right away. The engine was rusted, absolutely corroded, like it had been underwater for decades. Its paint, what little was left, was pale yellow, stripped down to ghostly flakes. The windows on the cab were shattered, jagged shards catching the moonlight. There were no lights on inside, no engineer, no sound from the engine at all. Just the squeal of metal on metal as it passed. I checked my phone, no signal, which wasn't unusual out there, but the time caught my eye. 12:08 a.m. I remember that. Clearly because I made a note to tell my wife how long I'd been stuck when I got home. I expected to wait a few minutes, maybe 10, but the train kept going. 10 minutes became 20. The cars were a random assortment tankers stained with some oily black residue, livestock cars with slatted wooden sides like they hadn't been, used since the 50s, and even a few rusted-out Amtrak-style passenger coaches with windows either missing or shattered. And the worst part? They were empty. Or they looked empty at first. At one point, around 30 minutes in, I saw something. That made my stomach clench. One of the passenger cars rolled by with its window partially intact. There was a child in the window. A little boy, maybe 8 or 9, with blonde hair and pale skin. He was waving, slowly, not in a cheerful way, but like someone signaling for help underwater. His eyes glowed red, not like demon red or Hollywood CGI, but a dull internal glow like embers. They locked with mine as the car slid past, and I swear hand to God that kid didn't blink once. I jumped out of the truck, fully intending to run to the train, to maybe try and climb on or at least yell something. But the moment my boots hit the gravel, the air went cold. Not the kind of cold you get from wind or nightfall, but bone deep. I was shivering instantly, breath coming out in white puffs. And the noise changed before. It had just been the metallic clatter of wheels. Now I heard a low groaning, almost like voices carried on the steel, whispering, not words. Not at first, but murmurs that grew louder the longer I listened. My heart started pounding and I got back in the truck, slammed the door, and locked it without thinking. An hour passed. Then another. The train didn't stop, didn't slow down. Car after car, stretching back into the night like some impossible steel serpent. My truck ran out of gas at 2:04 am. I remember watching the dash light flicker off like it was giving up. I sat there in the dark, engine dead. The only light the fading moon and the occasional flicker from inside the train cars. At 2:18, I saw her. A woman in a hospital gown, barefoot, standing inside a livestock car. She was pressed against the slats, her face covered in dried blood. Her eyes were swollen shut, her mouth twisted in what looked like a permanent scream. She didn't move, didn't even blink, just rolled past and was gone. A few cars later came a row of flatbeds, each one with a black body bag lying in the center. The bags bulged in the middle like something was trying to move inside them. One of them unzipped. As it passed me, but I couldn't see what was inside. Just darkness. And still the train rolled on. Eventually the whispering got louder. I couldn't understand the language, if it even was a language, but it felt like it was meant for me. Like I was being spoken to directly. Accused, maybe. Judged. I started remembering things I hadn't thought about in years. Bad things. Things I did when I was younger. Cruel things. The kind you bury deep because you're sure no one will ever know. And as each car passed, I felt them come back sharper. More vivid. Like the train was dragging them out of me. Like it was feeding on them. The last thing I saw before I passed out was a dining car. One of those old Pullman types with the glass windows. Inside, people were seated at tables. Dozens of them. Dressed in suits, formal wear, tuxedos from another era. They were all skeletons, their bones yellowed, jaws fixed open as if mid-laugh or mid-scream. Their hands gripped silverware, and the plates were piled with raw meat, some of it human, some of it unidentifiable. One of them turned and looked at me. Just a skull, but somehow it looked at me and smiled. When I woke up, it was 7:10 a.m. The train was gone, no trace of it. The rails were still, and the desert around me was quiet, hot, and back to normal. My truck was dead, but the battery worked enough to show me the time. I walked 10 miles back to Alpine, called my wife, told her the truck broke down and I'd been stuck. I didn't mention the train dot, but here's the thing. That train has been seen before. I found out a few weeks later while getting my truck towed that an old guy who ran a bait shop near Marathon swore he saw something like it back in '76, said it showed up on the rails during a thunderstorm, and when it passed, 3 people in town were found dead heart attacks, all of them. One of them was his own brother. Said his brother had looked into the train's engine cab and dropped like a sack of bricks. Others have claimed they've seen it too. Always late at night, always heading west. No markings on the cars, no numbers, no company logo. Just a procession of rust, death, and silence. Some say it's a government experiment gone wrong. Others think it's a ghost train collecting souls. One guy told me it's a punishment, a kind of limbo for the worst people. A train that never stops, never arrives. Just circles the earth on tracks we can't see unless it wants to be seen. Don't have a theory. I just know I saw it, and it saw me. And ever since that night, every now and then, I hear it. Not loud, not close, but far off. In my dreams, mostly. The whistle. The clatter. The whispering. Last night, I heard it again, dot closer. Between El Paso and Van Horn, the stretch of I-10 rolls like a hot ribbon through a land too dry to die properly. It's a place of dust and memory, long and open and mostly empty, with scrub brush clinging to the sides of mesas like forgotten thoughts. People drive that highway half asleep, hypnotized by the white lines and the static hiss of wind through cracked windows. They say the road can make you see things if you're not careful. Heat mirages, shadow animals, phantom lights. In the distance. But there's something else out there too. Something real enough to scare the people who've seen it into never coming back that way again. It's a billboard. One billboard. Doesn't matter how far you drive or which direction you're headed. It always seems to be between El Paso and Van Horn. Not near a town, not close to a rest stop, just there. You pass it, and it's gone before you realize you even saw it. Then maybe a few miles later, it's back again, different this time. People who grew up around the area say they never see it. But if you're not from around there, if your license plates aren't Texas, if your accent isn't right, well, then you might see it. And if you do, you better hope it's not showing you something you recognize. The first time Henry saw it, he thought it was just a weird ad for a defunct soda brand. Blue Cola, it said in peeling, faded script, the logo like something ripped out of a 1980s magazine. A blue glass bottle shimmered in the sun, beads of sweat trailing down the label. Henry hadn't heard of Blue Cola since his uncle's gas station in Tallahassee went under in '93. He even said it aloud, "Blue Cola?" And his wife, Marlene, looked up from her phone and said, "What are you talking about?" "That billboard back there." She glanced over her shoulder, but the desert was already behind them, the empty plains unbroken except for an occasional lone mesquite. I didn't see anything. Henry chalked it up to a trick of the light. They were on their way to Tucson for a wedding, her cousin's third, his first with this particular woman, and he was already irritable. The road seemed to hum under the tires in a way that made his teeth itch. But a few miles down the highway, he saw it again. Only this time, it wasn't soda. This time it was a black and white photo, an old one. A child standing in a dry riverbed, naked from the waist up, ribs sticking out like piano keys. The face was turned slightly away, but something about the tilt of the jaw, the scar on the left shoulder, the strange buckle in the knee, it made Henry's stomach not that he saw that photo once. In a manila envelope at the courthouse in Lubbock, Henry had been a public defender back in his 20s, fresh out of law school and full of bleeding heart energy. That case stuck with him. A woman had drowned her 5-year-old son in a horse trough behind her trailer. Said the boy wasn't hers. Said he came from somewhere else and wore her real son's skin. They found photos, the kind the police never released to the public. The kind they usually destroy afterward. Henry blinked hard and the billboard was gone again. "Marlene?" he said, voice dry. "Did you see that? The kid on the billboard?" She shook her head without looking up. "I think you need a break." The next time it appeared, she did see it. Because it showed her dot at first, neither of them recognized the image. It was an advertisement for a funeral home in Odessa. Rest Easy Memorials. The background was a casket, open, satin-lined. The body inside was peaceful, hands folded over the chest, makeup carefully applied. But the face, "Oh my God," she said, it was her. Older, a little heavier around the eyes, but definitely her. "Is this some kind of AI thing?" she said, voice rising. "Did they get my photo from Facebook? Is this legal?" Henry didn't answer. His grip on the steering wheel had gone white-knuckled. They passed a truck, and the sun glinted off the side mirror. The air felt too still, like the car was underwater. He pulled into a gas station on the edge of Sierra Blanca, near the little airport, the kind that gets used twice a month if that. He stumbled out of the car and dry heaved near the pumps. When he came back, Marlene was searching Rest Easy Memorials on her phone. "It doesn't exist," she said. "Not in Odessa, not anywhere. Google has nothing." The clerk inside the store was a woman in her 60s, thin and brittle-looking, with sun-cracked lips and a glass eye that never quite tracked right. She sold them water bottles and beef jerky and didn't blink when Henry asked about the billboard. "You saw it," she said flatly. "What do you mean?" "People see it sometimes, not locals. Just the ones passing through. Always on their way to someplace else. You headed west?" "Tucson," Marlene said. "Better turn around." Henry gave her a thin smile. "Why's that?" The woman leaned forward, the glass eye gleaming. "It shows you things that ain't happened yet, or things that shouldn't have. You see something up there, it's a warning. But warnings ain't guarantees. Some folks, they see nothing. Some folks see what they're already running from. Some folks see a little ahead. And some," she paused, cocked her head. "Some see the end." Marlene left the store. Henry stayed a moment longer. "You ever see it?" he asked her. "Don't drive anymore," she said. They got back on the road. Tucson wasn't far now, but Henry drove slower, more carefully. His eyes kept flicking to the horizon, scanning the shoulder, the rocks, the dry gulches. And sure enough, maybe 20 miles from the border, it appeared one last time. The billboard was cracked down the center, split like dry wood, a storm black. Sky swirled behind it, and in the middle, painted in crimson letters, was a date, August 4th. That was in 3 days. Beneath the date, in block letters, "Eastbound only." Neither of them spoke. Not for the next hour. Not until they crossed into Arizona and the landscape changed, and the air felt different. Lighter, almost. The wedding was nice enough. Marlene's cousin looked nervous, his bride beautiful and forced. But the whole weekend felt off. Henry couldn't sleep. On the second night, he dreamed of that dead child in the trough, only this time the mother's face was gone and replaced with Marlene's. When he woke, his wife was sitting on the hotel room couch, staring at her own reflection in the black TV screen. "I don't want to drive home," she said. "We can fly," he offered, but they didn't. The flights were all booked. Some sort of convention. They tried renting another car from another agency, but Henry's card was flagged. It was like the universe had made its decision. They were driving. On the morning of August 4th, they passed through Benson, then Lordsburg, then Deming. The sun hung low and sharp. At Las Cruces, Henry stopped to get gas and stared long and hard at the I-10 sign. They could take another route. Go north, loop through Alamogordo. Or south, to Marfa, stay the night. But they didn't, and somewhere between Van Horn and El Paso, they saw it again. The final billboard. It showed their car, their exact car. Dent on the rear bumper, cracked right mirror. It was overturned in a ditch, flames licking from the engine block. 2 bodies inside, a man and a woman, unmistakable. Them. They passed it in silence. Henry's hands trembled on the wheel. He slowed to 45, then 30. Then a truck came out of nowhere. No headlights, no warning. It boned them just south of Kent. Locals said the couple died on impact. The truck driver walked away with a broken collarbone and a blank expression. He claimed the car pulled out in front of him, sudden-like it had appeared from nothing. People in the area still talk about it. About the couple from Florida, or maybe Georgia, depending who's telling it. About the crash that didn't make sense. About the strange billboard nobody local ever sees, but everyone's heard about. A woman in a gas station once swore she saw her son's obituary on it. He died 2 weeks later. If you're ever on I-10, keep your eyes ahead. And if you see a billboard that doesn't make sense, one that feels too familiar, don't look twice. And whatever you do, don't drive eastbound on August 4th. In Toya Vale, Texas, just a few miles west of Balmorhea, the wind never really stops blowing. It's not a violent wind, not usually, but the kind that stirs up the grit in the air and dries out your lips before you've crossed the porch. Sun doesn't set so much as melt behind the Chizos, leaving behind a strange, shimmering dusk that doesn't feel quite real. Some folks call it beautiful, but if you've lived here long enough, if you've had enough lonely drives down Highway 17, you start to feel that it's hiding something. The stories about the boy didn't start with the internet. People in Toya Vale and the surrounding ranches have been whispering about him since the 1950s. Maybe longer, though nobody can pin down exactly when the first sighting was. What they all agree on is the same image. A barefoot boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, wearing an old, oversized brim hat, something a rancher would have worn 50 years ago. His clothes are dusty, faded denim and a button-up shirt with mother-of-pearl snaps. He never runs. He just walks slowly along the shoulder of 17, usually heading south like he's following something, only he can see if you stop and people have he'll come up to your window. His feet coated in red dust, eyes so light they almost look silver. He doesn't ask for a ride or water or help. He just leans in a little and says, real polite like, "Do you hear them singing too?" And that's where the choices start. Most folks say no. They laugh it off, say the kids playing a game, or maybe he's a ghost or some hitchhiker's weird kid. They drive off, heart beating a little faster than usual, and think that's the end of it. But if you say yes and a few people have, he smiles, tips that hat of his, and walks off into the desert. Just veers away from the road like he knows where he's going, and you don't hear anything right then. No singing, no voices. Just the wind and maybe the crunch of his bare feet on gravel. It's in the dreams that it starts. I heard this all from my Uncle Mike, who ran a little roadside towing service for 30 years. He was a practical guy, not the kind to buy into ghost stories. But toward the end of his life, he started saying things that made me think maybe the story had touched him in some way. One night, about 2 years ago, I drove out from Odessa to visit him. He'd been having what my cousin called episodes. Said he'd wake up with blood on his hands, no wounds. Just blood under his fingernails on his sheets. Kept claiming someone was singing outside his trailer at night. I figured it was dementia or stress. He was in his 70s and lived alone way out off County Road 3078 near the hills. The kind of place where you could scream all night and no one would hear. That evening, he sat in his recliner with a loaded shotgun across his lap and told me about the night he met the boy. It was the summer of '93, he said. He'd gotten a call about a broke-down Buick just north of the Balmer Heat turnoff. Got there around 11 p.m., middle of nowhere. And there the kid was, walking slow on the shoulder, not a soul around for miles. Said he rolled down his window, called out, "You all right, buddy?" And the boy turned, walked right up to the truck and asked him that question. "Do you hear them singing too?" Mike said he laughed. Thought the kid was just playing. Maybe high. Maybe lost. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. Just said yes, figuring he'd play along, and the boy smiled. Walked off into the dark, into the cactus and mesquite, and vanished. Before Mike could call after him, the dream started a week later. I was out in the desert, he told me. Flat land, stars like pinholes in a bedsheet. No moon, but somehow I could see. And there was music. Not singing like people think. Not a choir or words. It was ... something humming. Voices, but wrong. Low, like they were under the sand. At first it came just in sleep. But over time, he said, he'd hear the humming when he was awake. Faint, like a radio through a wall. It always came from the same direction south, toward the desert. Sometimes he'd find himself standing outside at night, barefoot, facing that direction without knowing how he got there. Eventually, he stopped sleeping. By then, I could see he hadn't been right in a long time. He had bags under his eyes deep as bruises, and the skin on his hands looked raw, like he'd been digging in gravel. There was blood on the doorknobs and little bits of something dry and dark on the floor near the windows. That night, I stayed in the trailer. Slept on the couch while he locked himself in his room. Around 3 a.m, I heard singing. Not pretty, not melodic. Just this wavering, rising hum, like a throat singing from far off, carried by the wind. I sat up, thinking maybe Mike. Had his radio on, but it wasn't coming from inside. It was outside the trailer, distant, moving. I opened the curtain, and I swore to God, standing maybe 30 yards from the front of the trailer was a small figure wearing a wide brim hat. Just standing there, still. I didn't open the door. I just watched. Eventually, the figure turned and walked into the darkness, back toward the hills. I told myself it was a dream, but I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Mike was gone in the morning. No note, no signs of struggle. His shotgun was still on the floor. His boots were by the door. The only tracks were a pair of bare footprints in the red dirt. Leading toward the desert, they never found him. After the funeral, a quiet affair with a closed casket, I started hearing the music in my own dreams. Not every night, just sometimes. Always the same landscape, always the same humming voices from under the earth. Then, about 6 months ago, I took a wrong turn while heading out to Fort Davis and ended up on that same stretch of Highway 17. Just past dusk, sky all orange and purple, air thick with heat lightning. I saw him. Same as ever. Barefoot, walking south, the hat casting his face in shadow. I slowed down. For a second, I almost pulled over, but I didn't. Still, as I drove past, his head turned slightly. Just enough that I caught a flash of his eyes, pale, not white, not gray, just ... empty. Since that night, the music's gotten louder, not always. In dreams now. Sometimes in the quiet moments when the fridge stops humming and the house creaks just right. Sometimes in the middle of the day when the sun is high and there's no reason for shadows. I'll hear it, humming low, like something calling from beneath my feet. I haven't told anyone this. Not until now. I don't sleep much anymore. I keep seeing things in the mirror, just flickers, little moments when I swear there's someone standing behind me, just out of view. And sometimes when I'm out walking, I'll find footprints. Small barefoot tracks in the dust, even when it hasn't rained in weeks. I don't know what the boy is. Maybe he's a ghost. Maybe something older. Maybe just a trick of the land out here, where time folds in strange ways and things get lost in the dust. But I know one thing. If you're ever driving down Highway 17 and you see a boy with a wide brim hat, barefoot, walking slow in the dying light, don't stop. And if you do, don't say yes. The turnaround sat at the end of a road no one had any business being on. County Road 4280, about 16 miles outside Presidio, Texas, ran straight into the desert and stopped like it had lost its nerve. There weren't signs or markers, no fences or warnings. Just scrub brush, hard-packed earth, and the empty blue of the sky stretching out forever. You had to know about it to find it, and if you knew about it, you knew to stay away. But people didn't always listen. The bus had been there since the early 90s. A faded yellow-blue bird, paint sun-peeled and blistered, frame sagging like it was tired of holding itself up. The windows were fogged with dirt, most of them cracked, some missing. One tire was flat, the others slowly melting into the sand over the years. The door hung half open on a rusted hinge, and the entire thing leaned slightly, like it was drunk. Kids from Presidio used to sneak out there with spray paint cans and cheap beer, leaving their names and obscenities scrawled across the steel carcass. But that had stopped around 2007, after the Romero boy vanished. His name was Danny, 15 years old. Took his cousin's truck one night and drove out there with two of his friends. He wanted to prove he wasn't scared. They say he climbed inside the bus while the others waited. He laughed, made faces through the front window. Then he stopped. Moving, just froze. His friends said they saw him raise a hand, like he was waving, then drop out of sight. The truck was still running when the deputies found it in the morning. Doors open. The other boys were sitting on the ground, shoes off, crying like toddlers. Danny wasn't there. They found no blood, no sign of a struggle. It was like the wind had taken him. 5 days later, he came walking out of the Desert 30. Miles south, covered in sunburns and deep, symmetrical scratches that ran down both his arms. He didn't say a word. Not that day, not since. His hair had gone gray, and his hands trembled constantly. He was placed in a long-term care home in El Paso. Still there, last I heard. People don't talk about it much anymore. But they don't forget. Every October on the night of the 14th, the bus lights up. Not the kind of lights you'd expect from something mechanical. It glows faintly, a sick pale white, like phosphorescence underwater. Locals call it Ghost Light Night. Some believe it's a glitch in reality. Some say it's a warning. But everyone agrees on one thing. When the glow starts, don't get close. Don't go near the bus. And whatever you do, don't open the door. But some stories keep pulling. And some people can't leave well enough alone. My name is Mark Haller. I used to run cattle out near Candelaria. Got about 100 acres of scrub and fence that never made me rich but kept the lights on. My land ran close to where that turnaround sat. Not close enough to see it, but close enough that I'd sometimes feel off, like the air got heavier when you drove past, like something old and watching live just out of sight. I never gave the bus much thought until my dog, Whiskey disappeared. He was a mutt. Big shoulders, deep bark, part pit, part shepherd, all heart. Slept at the foot of my bed every night for 7 years. One morning I opened the door and he was just gone. No holes in the fence, no signs of a struggle. Just an empty yard and a silence that felt wrong. I looked everywhere. Checked with neighbors, called the shelter, even drove up and down 4,280, though I hadn't done that in years. That's when I saw it. It was October 14th. Right around 9 p.m. the air had that dry, electric feel like before a storm. I was making my second pass down the road when I saw the glow through the brush, soft and white, not headlights, not moonlight. I parked the truck and got out. The light wasn't bright. More like it seeped from the bus, glowing in patches around the seams and windows. The desert was dead quiet. Not a coyote yip, not a cricket chirp. Just the wind and that faint humming you sometimes hear in deep silence. The bus looked full, like there were people inside. I walked closer. I don't know why. Maybe part of me thought whiskey had gotten in somehow. Maybe I just needed to see through the grime on the windows. I saw shapes. Little ones, kids, dozens of them sitting stiff in the seats. Their heads jerked with every step I took, like they were tracking me without turning. I stopped maybe 10 feet from the door. They weren't moving naturally, more like mannequins being tugged by invisible strings. Their faces were smooth, not blank like they had no features, but blank like a painting left unfinished. Eyes without pupils, skin without pores, mouths wide, too wide, open in soundless screams. One of them had its hand pressed to the glass, fingers spread like it was reaching out. The hand had too many joints, bent wrong, twitched like it was remembering how to move. I should have turned around. I should have gone home, nailed my door shut, and prayed. But I took one more step. The door snapped open, not creaked, snapped, like a trap springing. A wind blew out from the interior, hot and damp, smelling like mildew and old pennies. My vision blurred. I could feel something in my head shift, like pressure behind my eyes. And then I heard it, not with my ears, in my bones. A static scream, endless, bottomless. The sound of something that didn't belong trying to crawl inside me. I don't remember reaching out. I don't remember my hand touching the cold steel of the doorframe. But I remember the moment I crossed the threshold. It was like falling into ice. I woke up in my truck. Sun beating down through the windshield. My shirt was soaked with sweat. My boots were muddy, even though the ground had been dry. I looked in the mirror. My hair had gone from black to snow white, every strand. My teeth chattered, though it was already over 80 degrees. It was a week later. My calendar had jumped. My voicemail was full. My neighbor, Lacey, had called the sheriff after not seeing me for days. They found my truck parked on 4,280, keys still in the ignition, engine cold. No sign of me. No footprints. Nothing. I had just vanished. I tried to tell them what happened. Sheriff Ruiz looked at me like I was drunk. My sister cried, said I needed help. I don't blame them. Hell, I wouldn't believe me either. But I brought something back. I didn't know it at first. Just little things. Dreams I didn't remember having, but woke up from gasping. Shadows that moved against the grain of the light. My dog, Whiskey, came back too. 3 nights after I did. He scratched at the door until I opened it, but he was wrong. He wouldn't come inside. Just stood on the porch, tail still, ears back. His fur was matted, his eyes cloudy. He wouldn't bark, wouldn't eat. Just stared at me with that dead expression like he was waiting for something. After 2 days, I found him dead. Not from starvation or wounds, just dead. Like the light inside him had switched off. I buried him out back. said a prayer. But I don't think it helped. Now I hear things at night. The hum, mostly, and sometimes the faint squeal of school bus brakes. I moved my bed away from the windows. Bought blackout curtains. Doesn't stop the light. It seeps through. That same pale glow, slow and soft, pulsing in the dark. October's coming again. I can feel it. The bus wants something. Maybe not me. Maybe it's just waiting for whoever touches the door next. There's an itch in my bones. A pressure behind my eyes that never goes away. And in the quiet hours before dawn, when everything is still, I hear the whisper of little feet moving down the hall. I haven't opened my bedroom door in 2 nights, and I don't think I'm alone anymore. The wind was hot and dry when Carter Lane stepped out of his truck, the sun blistering down on the West Texas salt flats like it wanted to burn a hole through the desert itself. The air shimmered with heat mirages, and the world around him looked stretched and distorted, like the horizon had been painted by a shaky hand. He pulled his hat low and checked the GPS on his rigged-up tablet, blinking against the glare as he marked the coordinates for his next survey site. The flats had been dead quiet since he'd arrived 2 days ago, nothing but sun, salt, and silence. He was here on a solo assignment from the university, part of a new state-funded push to document seismic anomalies and subterranean formations near old oil country. What they were really looking for was another boom hidden under the bones of a place most people forgot existed. Carter crouched beside the ground-penetrating radar sled and activated the scan, watching the readout as it plotted a cross-section of the salt crust beneath him. At first, it was the usual chaotic mess-folded sediment layers, odd mineral pockets, fossil trails from ancient seas. But then he saw it. Clean lines. Straight angles. Symmetry. The kind of things nature didn't do on her own. He zoomed in. The radar showed right-angles walls. It looked like connected structures, some of them rectangular, others larger, oddly complex. They ran about 10 feet below the surface, too shallow to be caves, too precise to be random fractures. There were even what looked like narrow openings, windows, or doors. He stared at the tablet, frowning. No settlements had ever been documented out here. Not officially, not even in the old Spanish mission records. The nearest town, Amarillo Creek, was 30 miles to the east, a dying place with a single gas station, a diner that only opened on Sundays, and a sheriff's office with more rust than law. He'd passed through it on the way in and spoken with an old man outside the cafe, who'd told him the salt flats had once been part of a shallow sea that dried up 1,000 years ago. Ain't nothing out there but bones and bad luck, the man had said, spitting into the dust. You start digging, you best be ready to find more than dirt. Carter hadn't thought much of it at the time. Every old town had its stories. But now, staring at the impossible geometry beneath his boots, he felt something press behind his ribs, a dull pressure that had nothing to do with the heat. That night, he camped out in the flats. He didn't want to waste fuel driving back and forth. The wind picked up around midnight, stirring the salt into whispering trails that curled along the ground like pale smoke. He zipped his tent shut, crawled into his sleeping bag, and tried not to think about what he'd seen. He told himself he'd send the data to the university in the morning, maybe request a second opinion, maybe come back with ground crews, but then the dream came in it. He was underground, lying flat on his back, and the ceiling above him was packed earth, brown and cracked and too close to his face. He could hear voices, dozens of them. They were muffled, but he could make out screams, sobbing, fists pounding against dirt. He could feel the vibrations of hands hitting the roof of some chamber just beneath the surface. A woman's voice, guttural, broken, begged over and over again for someone to listen. He woke up choking, gasping like he'd swallowed a mouthful of soil. The tent was stifling, and he tore through the zipper flap, stumbling out into the moonlit flats, coughing. The wind had died completely. There was no sound, just the hiss of his breath and the dry rustle of his own heartbeat. He didn't sleep again. The next morning, Carter drove into Amarillo Creek and walked into the gas station, where a young man in a faded blue cap was restocking motor oil. Carter asked him if he knew anything about the flats, about stories, legends, anything. The man tilted his head. "You talking about where the ground sings sometimes?" Carter blinked. "Sings?" "Yeah," the man said, straightening. "Wind gets caught in them little cracks out there. Makes this kinda hummin', like a choir way off underground. Spooks the dogs bad. Old folks say it ain't just wind, though." "What did they say it is?" He shrugged. "Depends who you ask. Some say it's voices. Some say it's the earth remembering something ugly. My granddad said there used to be a town out there. Not on no map, just a place folks knew about. Said it got buried after a storm. Like the ground just opened and swallowed it. Only thing they ever found was a little iron bell that washed up after a flood, like the kind they used to hang outside schoolhouses." Carter bought a coffee and sat in his truck for an hour, staring out at the road. The radar data still sat in his tablet, cold and sharp and impossible. He could go back, take another scan, maybe even dig. But something about that dream lingered. The sound of those fists, the pressure in his chest, the terrible knowledge that whatever was buried under. The salt wasn't dead, not really. Just sealed away. Still, he went back. He told himself he'd just map a wider area. No digging, no contact. Just data. But by late afternoon, he was 30 yards from the original scan site, and his readings had only grown more elaborate. More rooms. Staircases. What looked like an entire street grid. He marked a place where a narrow shaft led downward in a perfect circle, like an old well or elevator chute. Something flickered in his peripheral vision. A shadow, long and narrow, slipping just outside the radar sled's range. He turned, but there was nothing. Just white flatness stretching for miles. Then he heard it. Faint. So faint he thought it was his own ears playing tricks. Knocking. 3 short. Taps. Then silence. Carter left the equipment and walked toward the sound. He stopped when he reached a patch of salt that seemed slightly darker, as if the ground were thinner there. He knelt and pressed his hand to it. Tap. It came again, right beneath his palm. He jerked back, heart slamming in his chest. There was no way. No way that was real. The data showed solid fill-no air pockets, no tunnels, but the knocking had felt deliberate. He drove out that night, too fast, leaving half his gear behind. The university called 2 days later. His data had been analyzed. One of the geophysicists said the readings didn't match any known natural formations. They asked if he'd be willing to return with a team. Carter didn't respond. He didn't answer any calls after that. He stayed in a motel near the edge of Amarillo Creek, chain smoking and staring at the flats through binoculars he never lowered. He stopped sleeping. When he closed his eyes, he could still see the ceiling of dirt, still hear the voices begging through it, still feel the panic of those who were buried alive, encased in salt and silence. One night, a thunderstorm rolled in from the west, heavy with black clouds and dry lightning. The motel lights flickered, and Carter stepped outside onto the gravel. The wind screamed across the flats, and in it, he swore he heard them again. Hundreds of voices. Calling, screaming, asking to be let out. And just beneath the howl of the wind, he heard the sound of bells. Not one, but many, ringing from beneath. The ground. The next morning, his truck was found abandoned on the flats, door open, keys still in the ignition. Tracks led 30 yards into the salt, then stopped. As if the earth had swallowed him mid-step, Locals still talk about it. They say Carter went looking for something that didn't want to be found. And if you go out to the salt flats when the wind's just right, you might hear what he heard. Not just the bells. Not just the knocking dot, but the voices of an entire town, buried alive and still waiting. Waiting for someone to remember.